control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all connected but separated, misunderstood and so frustrated. A million armies of one have invaded, watching you and watching me. We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere. Watching me. The little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. We the people have taken over. We the people are little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Feel your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching. We watched you for so long. We wait for you to fall. We will expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
let your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman, that we're the only ones who can be strong, but we break on command, cause women rule the world.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. And we'll stop till I reach the top just to be there with you. And I still trip over my feet, and my heart's still scared.
Ignition sequence start.
I'm such a lucky guy.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Said the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. They cut so gentle, play so fair.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and thank you for listening in at spacedoutradio.com, on Spreaker, and now on Revolution Radio. We welcome you to tonight's show as we broadcast out of Uncle Jimbo's cabin in the Great White North, live on this Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning if you're on the East Coast. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are broadcasting 3 hours a night, 7 days a week, because we want to be your official one-stop shop when it comes to the supernatural, extraterrestrial, ufological, conspiratorial, and so much more. Here at Spaced Out Radio, we are broadcasting 3 hours a night, 7 days a week, because we want to be your official one-stop shop as we continue on. Like our music? If you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, you can listen to the guitar god himself, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses. He takes care of all of our musical needs. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, we'd like to say hi, how are you, to everyone listening in on the Revolution Radio chat room, on the High Plains Talk Radio Network, in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker, along with our fans on Facebook at Euphoria Chronicles, Chronicles of the Unknown, Forest Moon Paranormal, and our flagship chat room, the SOR Space Travelers. Have you signed up for the SOR Space Travelers Club yet? No? Well, it's time. It's only $5 a month, and with that, your name gets entered in a monthly prize draws. You get access to a private group interviews, access to a special section on our website, and so much more. Hey, we're going to give you a hell of a lot more than just access to our archives. While at spacedoutradio.com, you can also read our latest blogs. Mine is on Bigfoot, and you can check out Eric Markham's SOR Spacewire for your latest and weird news. Tonight's show is brought to you by the new Agora newspaper, the official paper of this show, the iTunes app Spirit Storybox, it's the official ghost hunting app of SOR, Rivulet Reiki and Readings, providing healings in person or at a distance, and PurplePlates.com, helping heal your body, mind, and soul. Remember, if you are a listener of Revolution Radio, it is the largest non-profit online radio station going. Do us a favor, take the time to visit freedomslips.com and donate today. The multitude of stories that have come from experiencers who have had run-ins with extraterrestrials is literally in the hundreds of thousands annually. And that's just from people who have mentioned their incredible encounter. Think about this statistic for a minute. People in the field of ufology figure that only 1 out of every 10 encounters ever gets reported or told. 1 out of every 10. That's not a high number of reports. And then when you go and throw in the knowledge that people have, like our guest tonight, Ray Szymanski, then it opens up a whole different field for the experiencer. Ray is a man with over 40 years of research and work experience, including working at the infamous Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. And how many times has Wright-Pat seemed to come up on this show over the last year? Think about that. His book is called 50 Shades of GREYS. As we get into the ET phenomenon pretty hard tonight, we welcome in Ray Szymanski. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. Good to have you with us. How are you?
I'm awesome, Dave. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you taking the time to be with us because I think your topic of study is so important and it is so well documented in your own personal notes and your own personal research that I'm really surprised, Ray, that everybody hasn't ran out there and grabbed your book. Now, being a former employee of Wright-Patterson, I do know this from a former guest of ours who was a firefighter, in the vicinity, about 50 miles away, and he has friends who've been firefighters at Wright-Pat. And one of the scariest stories he ever told me, his name's Jim Patrick, and one of the scariest stories he ever told me, Ray, was that his firefighter buddies at Wright-Pat basically told them that the military has so many rules there. For instance, there are certain buildings that if they start burning, no matter if there's people screaming in it or whatever, the firefighters are to make that building burn or let it burn. Do not put it out. Do not rescue anybody in there. Just let it burn. That's an eerie place, my friend, Wright-Pat.
I have never heard that before, and quite frankly, I would call that rule into question. And in fact, now that you've brought up such a very strange and outrageous rule in my brain, I'm probably going to have to research it with people that I know that work in the first responders area at Wright-Patterson. That's just, a claim that I have a lot of difficulty getting my head around, right at this moment.
Well, that's part of the reason why we have you on here, so that way we can clean some of this up. Whether it's true, whether it's not, it's worth investigating because it does add to the mystery if there is a mystery there. And Wright-Patterson is filled with a lot of mystery. Tell us about your history with Wright-Patterson.
Well, I arrived on a very dreary day in January of 1973. I was a young cooperative education student from the University of Detroit, and a shout out to them. I wouldn't be where I was at today without their fine education. So we were going to do this work study where we'd work on a base for 3 months, come back to school for 3 months. We would alternate for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, there would be a decision made. Did I still want to work there, and or would they offer me a job? So it's January of 1973. I'm assigned to the Management Operations Office, which is in Area B, and at the time it was Building 22. And I was assigned to a gentleman who I mention in my book because of his importance in my life and my interest in UFOs. So the very first week, he said, come on, we're going to go across the hangar. We were in a small 2-story building, and there was a hangar in between us and the other side, which was also a 2-story, like a management building. So we're cutting through the hangar, and he says, have you heard about our aliens? And, I'm away from home for the very first time. I'm 19 years old, and I'm thinking, aliens? I wasn't even sure what he was talking about. And I said, we have aliens? And we're in the middle of this cavernous, empty hangar, which is 150 feet in length and has got to be 100 foot in width, which is now the Wright Field Fitness Center. So we're walking through, and I go, we have aliens? And he says, yeah, we have aliens in the tunnels. He's like upping the ante. And I go, we have tunnels. He said, yeah, we got aliens in the tunnels. So I said, well, can we go see these aliens in the tunnels? Well, no, it's a secret. Well, if it's a secret, how do you know about it? Well, everybody on base knows about it. And I thought, hey, what's his definition of secret? 10,000 people, 10,000 civilians on the base, plus probably at that time 12,000 military. What's he talking about? So, he tells me a little bit about the history, and I kept saying the word secret, and I think the third time I said the word secret, I must have scared him. And he goes, that's enough for now. I think we need to go back to work. Let's grab our candy bar. So back in 1973 is when I got all excited about aliens and tunnels and Wright-Patterson, and little by little I learned, that this was basically embedded in the culture.
And that's a mystery that has really been there since the Roswell crash. And I like to think of it as there was a secondary crash there at San Augustine, and we're going to get into that later on in the show. But apparently the rumor has it that when the crash happened at Corona, New Mexico, they shipped the ship and the bodies to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base before sending them over to Area 51. Was that ever talked about around there, or was the whole subject of Roswell, UFOs, extraterrestrials, besides this one incident, kept very quiet?
No. In fact, even to this day, the connection between Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and extraterrestrials and UFO permeates virtually every employee on the base. And I'll tell you, we'll get back to how I know that to be a fact. But I think, as most of the listeners would know, and we'll bring up some of the newbies up to speed, in 1947, there was reputedly a crash at Corona, New Mexico, about 70 miles north of Roswell, New Mexico, where the only nuclear-armed bombing group in the world were living and working at the time, the 509th Bomb Group. So a rancher by the name of Mac Brazel comes into town, brings this crazy-looking silvery material into the sheriff's office. The sheriff says, let's contact the Air Force Base. So they do, and Jesse Marcel and Sheraton Cavett go with the rancher the next day. They go out to this place, 70 miles in the middle of nowhere, north of Roswell, collect the stuff in a car and drive it back. And the Colonel Blanchard, who was in charge of the Roswell Army Airfield at the time, said, hey, guys, you're my intelligence officers. What do you think this is? And they said, we've never seen anything like this. It could be a spacecraft. So Colonel Blanchard, in his inimitable wisdom, had Walter Haut take the story and pass it out to the world, and it said, the Army Air Force has captured a crashed disc. Well, that literally shut down all the communication channel, because now the world is descendant upon the 509th and Roswell, and they want to know what's going on, and they're calling Washington, D.C. So immediately, within 24 hours, the powers that be said, we need to back off of the story because we're not going to get any real work done. So they published a news story that said, it was just a weather balloon, which is, of course, funny to those of us who've been reading about this topic for the last 40 years, because that's been their rationale for everything. It was a weather balloon. But the thing that everybody needs to understand is in the middle of the story, you have this unimpeachable source that was uncovered by Stanton Friedman. And that unimpeachable source is Jesse Marcel. Jesse was the intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. As far as I can tell, and the rest of the UFO historians can tell, he was pretty much up on everything that was in the air at the time. And he went on record saying, I think this was 78 or 79 when he first came out with the proclamation in an interview with Stanton. He said, what we recovered was not a weather balloon. It was not of this planet. And by the way, I was ordered to escort this stuff, make sure it got to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So if we believe Jesse Marcel, there are two things that you can take to the bank. One, it was not a weather balloon, and two, the material went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, that being said, you got to ask yourself the question, why Wright-Patterson? Well, in 1947, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was the center of the aeronautical engineering universe. So if anything fell out of the sky and we wanted to know more about it, you would take it to a place like Wright-Patterson, because they had the scientists there, they had money, they had facilities, they had secrecy oaths, they had equipment. They needed they had everything you absolutely needed to at least initially evaluate what you have and kind of sort it into a bin. It's ours, it's not ours. Well, also, there was, from 1947 on to 1969, were projects that the Air Force said were for the investigation of just these types of incidents. And there was Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book. So they had, from 1947 to 1969, the projects were housed at Wright-Patterson, and this was widely known. Everybody knew that the woo-woo stuff in UFOs and ETs were based at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that permeated the entire population of the base. So no matter who I asked about the initial week of my indoctrination, we had aliens in the tunnels, everyone to a person said, yeah, we all know about that stuff. So long history, unimpeachable sources, no doubt in my mind that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base handled that recovered material early in the evaluation process.
Ray, what is the security like at Wright-Patterson when it comes to topics like this? And the reason why I bring that up is I have a very good friend of mine in Las Vegas who's lived there a long time. He's part of the rock and roll scene there. And in the rock and roll scene, they talk about aliens. They talk about the paranormal. I never really knew that much until he filled me in. And one day, curiosity got to him. And he waited for one of the Janet jets at McCarran International Airfield to unload. And he followed one of the people home. And by the time he turned around to get back onto the street to get back towards his house, he was surrounded by black SUVs, basically telling them that if he didn't want to go to jail for the rest of his life, never do that again. Never feed that curiosity. Is it pretty much the same like that at Wright-Pat?
I never felt that, but, there were buildings on the base where I'm sure there were programs that probably had equal, if not higher, security requirements than the projects I work in. And I can tell you that, I worked in Building 620 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and that is a highly secure building. First you have to get on the base, so it requires a pass. And, they can use your chip reader and determine, if it's a valid card. Then you need another authorization to use a card, either that one or a second card, to get into a building. And in fact, Building 620 is such a controlled building. You had card readers. Then if you were on a project that required it, you might work in a vault. And of course, through the course of my career, especially early on, I actually worked in a vault. So only certain individuals were allowed entrance into the vault. And in some cases, only the boss had the code to get in. So, we'd all sit there waiting for the boss to show up, and he'd open up the vault in the morning. Now, you could get out, and, because they had, the fire thing, anyone could leave the vault at any time, but then there was a certain protocol for getting back in during the day, during the working day. You had to go to the bathroom or, make a phone call. There are other facilities there that are even more complex. To get into the vault, you would need a third card or, more access. And then, it could be nested from there. So what I think your friend encountered was some counterintelligence people. They want to make sure that certain individuals working at Area 51 or wherever that plane was coming back from wouldn't be followed. So, they're being observed, and they're counterintelligence folks, and they caught your friend snooping and doing something which he really shouldn't have been doing. Does that happen in Wright-Pat? Never happened to me, so I can't tell you. But I can tell you that there are some very, very secure places on that base.
How much of it is underground? How much is it that people can't see? Because that's probably where all the action is, right?
I couldn't answer that question. There are tunnels and vaults and tunnels. Every building pretty much has a basement, unless it's sitting on the water table. There are vaults on the 14th floor. There are vaults in the basement. I can't name a floor that I couldn't find a vault in certain buildings. Just today, I had a discussion with somebody from the National Park Service. We have a place called Huffman Prairie, and it's where the Wright brothers perfected their flying in 1904 and 1905. And it's run by the National Park Service now. And every once in a while, they'll wheel out a replica of the Wright Flyer, like they're going to do this Saturday. They got a day-long aero fair or something going on. And so they were setting up for it. And I was out there. I'm running a marathon on the 17th of September, the Air Force Marathon. So I was doing one of my final weekend, weekday runs, just several miles, and in Huffman Prairie, and I run across this guy. And he and I wound up in the conversation about what's underground. And he told me some stories I had never heard before. But again, I'm hesitant to say, yea, verily, we've got spaces underground that are as big as a city, because I've never been there. And until I get evidence of that, it's just speculation. Now, that said, we had B-52 bombers stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In fact, in 1973, when I arrived, they were always doing touch and goes because we were still doing Vietnam things. And, the B-52s would literally rattle the apartment that I lived in. And, of course, they had weapons there. They had a weapons storage area. And as far as I can tell, it was underground. Now, does that mean that there's a city under there? I don't know. Do we have lots of storage space underground? Yeah, because if you have a weapons storage area, for the most part, it's going to be underground. So maybe a lot of those rumors and speculations come from the fact that those weapons storage areas pretty much today are empty. The B-52s are gone, and, our nuclear armament that used to be there is gone, and who knows what they did with the facilities. Maybe turned them into an indoor soccer field. I don't know.
Do you think there is still an alien presence at Wright-Patterson?
Again, I don't know, but, look at Wright-Patterson. You have just about 100%, maybe one or two squadrons we don't have, of Air Force research labs that are resident on Wright-Patterson. In fact, they did the consolidation, and they moved a lot of the folks from Eglin up here and from Hanscom up here, and they closed down the place that was in Mesa, Arizona, and they brought them here. And they brought people from Brooks Air Force Base, so they built several new buildings. And, it is even a larger consolidation of anything and everything that's aerospace, including folks that might do human research. And, it's not a far step from there to doing research on another biological entity. So we still have the people with the clearances. We still have the contracting agencies. We still have machines and money and everything that would be necessary. So why not Wright-Pat? And we still have the security there. So it's certainly within the realm of my possibilities.
Do you think a lot of that was shipped over to Area 51 in Nevada, or maybe what they're calling Area 52 in Dugway?
Would they have shipped it there? I think it depends. They could have set up a place that has better machinery, better access to individuals that could be hired to do the research. So they would move it, as a convenience. And, we're all familiar with the Bob Lazar stories of how they flew these recovered craft. And, he talked about the sport model and all these other things. And then he brought John Lear out there, and, they filmed these objects going up in the air that looked very much like craft that made maneuvers that we can only do, with a hyperactive helicopter. So those type of things, if we had them, and they would have been here, let's say, for initial evaluation, I don't think we would have kept them here because there's not a lot of hidden space where you can fly those things undetected. Where, pre-Bob Lazar, nobody knew about it, and they had space where they had this huge perimeter, and I guess, Kickapoo Peak was probably as close as anyone got. So, they had the space out there to do those kinds of things. But if you think about it, if I got some spectrometry equipment here that I can analyze a piece of metal, and I give a guy, a 3-inch square, how much room do I need? How much security do I need? I give it to a guy and say, hey, put this in your X-ray diffraction machine and tell me what you know about it. And, a week later, he's sworn to secrecy. He has no idea what he evaluated, and he only needed the space like a 10 by 10 lab. So do we need to move stuff to Area 51 or elsewhere? No, we don't really have a need to do that. I think Wright-Pat could still be doing some of that.
You mentioned that the workers at Wright-Pat are very familiar with the extraterrestrial involvement there. Does this mean that they are currently working on extraterrestrial activity, or they just know the rumors?
I think they know the rumors, but that doesn't rule out that they could be working on something. And, you think about it, you have the Materials Directorate of Air Force Research Labs, and they're loaded with equipment and expertise. You have the Human Factors people in AFRL, which is Air Force Research Lab. You have Sensors Directorate. You have all the directorate, the Propulsion Directorate, Flight Dynamics, anything and everything with aeronautical engineering. And why not bring it there for evaluation? Again, how long we keep it there, I don't know. But let's look at the culture. Recently, I still have friends who work at Wright-Patterson because after my engineering days were kind of over, I was picked by the base commander to run a base-wide civilian wellness program. And now I know you're going, hey, this guy's an engineer. That's what he did for 40 years. How did this happen? Well, I took a little side turn because I'm a certified personal trainer through the Cooper Institute. And a 4-star general, his name was Speedy Martin. He was head of Air Force Material Command. Several years before I retired, he said, you know what, we have too many of our leading scientists and other civilians on the base checking out on us early because of strokes and heart attacks and long illnesses. We need to start monitoring our civilian workforce and getting them help that they should be getting on their own, but don't because they're too busy, because they're too dedicated. And we need a program to push civilian wellness. So that basically didn't make it through, and a lot of us petitioned Speedy Martin through the email, don't give up, because the union voted against it. So we pushed him, and he pushed back and wound up starting this program. And I was selected based on my, background in fitness to do that for Air Force Research Labs, which I did. And then I became the director for the whole base, so I had now 10,000 people underneath me. And where I'm going with the story is everyone on that base knew who I was because I was one of only a handful of people who had the authority to send an email out to the entire base population without that email being reviewed by anybody. So, you had the AFMC 4-star general, you had the base commander, you had the emergency guys. They could all send out an email to the entire base. I was given the holy water sprinkling to do that because I was running a base-wide program and was working directly for the base commander. So even today, I can reach back and get information, or, people will talk to me. And somebody that I know who works in FTD, are you familiar with FTD?
No, I'm not. Is that the flower company?
No, it's the Foreign Technology Division, and they're the ones who ran Project Blue Book. So a friend of mine who works in FTD, and this is a long answer to your question, I talked to him months ago, and I asked him about the aliens because he works in the building that even Barry Goldwater thought the aliens were in to be evaluated, and that's where the material would have come in initially because that was their job, to collect material from foreign entities. Well, my friend said that they were doing some duct work, and there were loud noises all through the building, but it seemed to emanate from the walls because of the way the duct work ran through the building. And he said the joke was, everyone goes, every time they heard another bang, it's the aliens. Well, this is 2015 when this is happening, and, the Roswell crash material came here in 1947. That's a lot of intervening years. What's that, 68 years? And so this is like the third generation of employees that are working there, yet they're all familiar with the mythology or factology of aliens, FTD, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that's just one instance of it. But I was surprised because, this was a younger employee. He's probably in his upper 20s, early 30s, and he and the rest of his office are very familiar with that connection. So it's alive and well today.
Do you consider yourself, Ray, to be a form of a whistleblower in coming out with all this information? I realize a lot of it is public, but you have firsthand, boots on the ground information about Wright-Pat. And the one thing that the military doesn't like is their own secrets or their own people coming out and talking about this sort of information.
Well, it's interesting. I did a talk to the North Carolina MUFON organization, and, it was an hour and 15-minute talk. And then I usually like to give a half hour for Q&A because I think people need to grill the speaker, cross-examine him to make sure there's no fabrication. So I did, and the first question out of the chute was, have they tried to kill you over this? And I thought, what's the crazy question? If they wanted to stop me, they should have when I called the literary office of the Air Force and said, ladies and gentlemen, I worked at the base for 39 years and 8 months, or something like that. I said, I'm publishing this book, and 25% of it's all about Wright-Pat. They said, do you have a publisher, a contract? I said, no. And they said, well, we don't need to talk to you. I said, what? And I tried to explain again what I had. They said, no, if you're self-publishing, this literary office, are not obligated to talk to you. So I said, I want to get this in writing. So I contacted Wright-Patterson's public affairs, talked to a guy there, and he said, yep, I'll get it for you. And, I got an email that says, you contacted us, you were absolved, you don't have a publishing contract, so we don't want to speak to you. So that being said, I had a secrecy oath, and to the best of my knowledge, I am still complying with those requirements. And what I've done, though, is, there are things out on the base that you can visually see. For example, FTD, the Foreign Technology Division, has a MiG fighter on a little concrete platform right in front of their building. Everybody sees it. In fact, 10,000 marathoners, well, I don't think we have that many, 7,000 marathoners will run right past it on the 17th of September. We'll all run right past the MiG. So it's not a secret. So what I decided to do was, hey, if you're going to lay it out there and I got a pair of eyes and still working, I'm going to go see what I can find. And I found some very interesting things like ancient burial mounds, and I found these slabs that seem to correlate to some archaeological sites that are known and unknown, and these could be burial sites. So I decided to take some of the stories that I can verify, some of the narrative that I've heard, some of my own snoopings, which, if you put a building out there and, let's say it's building 1, and I tell people a story about building 1, how can that possibly be a violation of my security oath? You put the building out there, it's visible on Google. But I take it a step further, and yeah, I might be on the hairy edge, but, in my estimation, I've never violated that secrecy oath. And in the best Clintonese, I have no intent on ever violating my security oath. Make sense?
It totally makes sense, and it's just very interesting that with the topics, even though you're very close to the topics and you're pushing the edge here, Ray, has anybody ever come up to you and just said, you might want to be careful with this, or have you ever had any warnings, or anybody contact you and just say, hey, what are you up to here?
No, but I've had some really interesting computer and phone issues since my book was getting near publication. And whether they're coincidence or not, I don't know. I as a computer guy, I would put them in the category of denial of service. So, for the first time ever, I was getting a blue screen for random reasons on my desktop, which I never had before. And this all started around September of this year as I was getting close to publishing. My Word, Word 2010 was doing belly flops on me. It never happened before. My internet service would cut in and out, and I had AT&T here, their tech specialists, 3 separate times with meters that were measuring the throughput, but on my screen it said I had no internet connection. They're three individuals. It's documented. They're totally befuddled. They still don't know what's going on. Is it coincidence? I don't know. I'm going to let the public judge that. I've had incidents with my phone, internet, computer, files, but no one has really come up to me and said, seasons exist. In fact, some people think that I'm being used as a conduit for soft disclosure, because of the fact that nobody's come up to me and said seasons exist. And in fact, some of the material I've gotten, it's been hard research, but, it's been hard come by, but no one has said anything. I mean, my book's out there, and in fact, I've actually had one individual come up to me and say, I want to verify your Men in Black story, which I found interesting, because he's a former government employee. But no, I've not gotten anything. So, if they wanted to stop it, they surely would have done it long before it reached publication.
Let's talk about the Men in Black, since you bring that up. I have never seen the Men in Black. I've never had any encounters. I knock on wood every time that I bring up this topic. But I know a lot of people who've had the encounters, who have had, the warning signs, or Men in Black, or the vehicles in black, or the helicopters in black, whatever. Even the ants in black walking by their doors. What's that like to have that feeling when Men in Black come up to you?
Well, it turns out that they're more... I observed the Men in Black, and I came up to one of them. In fact, I actually came up to both of them that I discovered. One was standing across the parking lot from FTD, Foreign Technology Division, and I was on a golf course. And it was late May, hot as all get out, of course, because, around the 15th of May, we kind of hit a switch. We get the humidity goes up, the temperatures start going up. This guy was dressed in all dark clothes and had the hat on, the classic, the quintessential Men in Black hat, and he was looking at a smartphone. And I was driving along the course, and he was sitting between the parking lot, and there's a graveyard that it's not on its original site, and that is also one of the locations where I found this stone slab that we'll get into later. And I saw this gentleman dressed as, had he been at a convention of Men in Black, you couldn't have spotted him from the rest of the guys. He would have just looked perfect. So I went up to him and said, hey, this is kind of crazy, but, seeing as how you're standing on the campus of an intelligence agency and you're dressed like a man in black, I just can't help but ask the question, are you one of these guys? And after a small hesitation, he said, no. And I said, well, I got to tell you, it's hot out here. I know you're in the shade of these trees, but you're wearing that hat too. And to me, it's like, who dresses like that? So he pauses long enough to take the hat off of his head, and there I see he's totally bald. Not only that, but he's got an olive tone to his skin. And I'm kind of squinting there, and I have great vision. I don't wear any corrective lenses. I don't wear contacts. you can go to the records, go to my optometrist, and he's amazed. So I'm looking at this thing, and I go, this is really strange. And, he looked normal size, normal head, except his head was totally bald, and his entire face and head was the same color. So, we had a small conversation, and, I asked him about, Men in Black, and he says he's not, and, he's trying to prove to me he's wearing this hat and this get-up because, he's got this strange skin color in this hat. So, fast forward a month, and I talked to him about my book. I see him again, same spot, same place on the edge of this parking lot. And I go up to him, I talk to him about my book, and here's what he asked me. He said, do you know about Area 51? Because he wanted to know if I was going to write about Wright-Patterson. I said, yeah. He said, well, are you writing anything about Area 51? I go, well, I've never been there, so I can't write anything about Area 51. Have you been there? He said, well, yeah. I said, you have? He said, oh, absolutely. And then he says, well, if you know the right people, you can actually get a tour of Area 51. Well, you know about Area 51, and I know what I know about Area 51. That sounds like a really scary, hard to get into place, right?
I just can't imagine what it would be like to go past the sign, even though there's no gates. I really don't want the camo dudes coming at me.
Exactly. So now, this is one of those places where obviously it's a holy grail to UFO researchers. I can do without a visit. And he's basically telling me, I can get you a tour of Area 51 because I know the right people. Well, there's a problem with that because, after so many years, your security clearance lapses, and I had been retired long enough that had indeed occurred, but he doesn't know that because I'm playing on the base's golf course, which is usually restricted for people who can get on the base. In fact, it's very much restricted to people who can get on the base. So he must have just assumed that I was, a base employee at the time instead of a retiree. Well, this is like mind-blowing because I'm getting an invitation to tour Area 51, and I'm thinking, wow, what an opportunity. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I just told them I've written a book about UFOs and Wright-Patterson, and they may take me to Area 51, whereupon I would disappear forever. So I decided that was a really good time to say, hey, thanks. I can't do that because I don't have a clearance anymore, but, nice meeting you. And if you look at my book, and I can't remember the page number, I want to say it's like 198 or something, there's actually a picture of a man in black in there. And it happens to be this guy.
Did you feel like he was human?
Yeah, he was playing with a smartphone. And they're not allowed, I don't think, to have their phones on. I think when they go in, there's a little bin there, like a tiny little locker, and they check stuff that they can't carry into the building with them. And they come out and get a breath of fresh air because there's no windows in the building. And they sit and they do their texting or, play games or whatever. Yeah, I thought he was very human. There was no, Men in Black movie, slanty, double, triple eyelid kind of thing going on. He seemed very genuine, but the skin tone and the dress, the fact that he was dressed this way was just overwhelmingly suggestive. And if he wanted to convince me that he was a man in black, he did it in spades.
Well, for him to all of a sudden offer you a trip to Area 51, he was either majorly pulling your leg or there was some reality to that, especially with your writings in hand, pretty much.
Exactly, and that's where this soft disclosure comes in. I know people who have been on programs where they used that terra firma to do their test because, it's isolated enough and there's the right support out there and, they do tests out there. And I had a chance to go out there to be an observer for one of these programs, but unfortunately, when they whittled the list down, only the brass was allowed to go, and they were mostly GS-15s and SESs and generals. So, I was the next level down and was told, I'm sorry, but there's only so much room on the bus. I don't miss it. I don't care one way or the other. But, the fact is that I knew people who went out there and did testing. So, it's not like I can't get my head around it. It's just I couldn't get my head around this person talking about it and basically, in other terms, telling me, hey, I can get you a tour out there. That was kind of mind-blowing.
Did you feel fear? Or was it just something
Not
that
at all.
reality?
Not at all. No, it was just like the guy was interested. In fact, he took my name. I gave him my first name and my email address because I said, look, if I took your picture, a close-up picture of a man in black dressed like you, and I put it in a book, the book will be famous. It'll be absolutely famous. And he goes, well, what are you offering me? I said, well, I'm offering you a cut of the proceeds. He goes, you mean like and he didn't use the word per diem, royalty. I said, yeah, royalty. And he goes, well, I don't think, and again, I document this within the book because I document both conversations I had with him. And I say, he says to me, in this environment, we shouldn't have this kind of exposure. And I said, what environment? And he nods towards the building, which is FTD, the former home of Blue Book. And I fully understand, of course. And he's saying, people in my, whatever I do in there shouldn't have this kind of exposure. And I couldn't agree with him more. So, no, there was no fear. It was just like, hey, I'm letting you know what it is. And I'm intrigued by the fact that you're writing a book, which is probably going to include this conversation and the building that I work in. And maybe he was just doing it to see what my reaction was. Was I going to be floored? Was I going to be impressed? It was all of the above. But, it's kind of cool on the outside, but on the inside I was going, OMG, is this really happening? But it was cool. I think it was kind of neat. And I think there was some respect that, I was a retiree, I let him know that, and, that I was a high level, an executive level person from the base. And I think he had to respect that too.
Well, on that note, you could see where he would maybe gain some trust because of your security clearance, like you just said. At any time, did he contact you afterwards, or was that the final conversation that you ever had with this gentleman?
That was the second conversation I ever had with him. And I'm sure if I were to book a tea time and pass by that spot or drive past there, the time of day, I'll just use the photo stamp of the photo I took, which shows him in silhouette and a blinding light coming off of a windshield. So there's no way you can identify him, but you can clearly see the clothes he's in. And, I could go back and find the time of day, and I'm sure I could probably engage him again. The question is, do I really want to? And I actually haven't even thought about that yet, if I really wanted to do that. So, but I did have another Men in Black observation, which happened at a local restaurant. And I saw a man who I do have two very clear photos of up close because he was at a table about 15 feet away, and he was dressed in the full Men in Black regalia, and it looked to me like he was shooting pictures of me sitting at my table.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and today, the cell phones can take from both sides now.
Yes,
some of the cameras can, and he was holding this phone. He was holding it in such a position that it could have looked like he was reading it, but why wouldn't he have had it above the desktop? He was at one of these, I'll call it a bar, but it's a freestanding, about 4.5 foot high in the middle of this restaurant. It's more of a beer place. And he was holding it underneath the tabletop, so, maybe to shield it from other eyes. He could have easily just held it up, but it looked to me like, unless he was trying to get some glare off of it, it was pointed in my direction. And I saw the screen snap a couple times, and then, he kind of turned it so I couldn't see it. And, of course, got my curiosity up, so I went up and talked to him. And, again, I basically gently asked him if he was one of the Men in Black, and he laughed no. And he told me he was a fundraiser, and I won't tell you for who. And so I still need to track that down. But my question is, who dresses like that and especially the time of year it was, again, if somebody wanted me to think they were men in black, mission accomplished. There was no doubt in my mind that this guy, was either dressed early for Halloween or, he was dressed in, the suit du jour.
What do you think the role of the men in black actually is, Ray?
Well, from what I've read, I think it was to keep really, really good evidence out of the public's hands, to obfuscate what was good facts that were out there that researchers could find, probably some witness intimidation. If you're familiar with the Stevensville Lights, there was Ricky Sorrells, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. These craft appeared over Stevensville, and they were seen by Constable Gayton and Steve Smith, and there was a pilot, and all these guys have been on TV. And Ricky Sorrells' story was the most compelling. He's a rancher. He's going out to check on the livestock, make sure they're all behind the gate they're supposed to be, and it's twilight, and he's of course a rancher, so he's got his varmint gun with him, and he feels a sensation or hears a hum, and he looks up, and he testified on multiple occasions that he's looking at a craft that totally blocks out the rest of the sky. He described it as being, 3 miles long and 2 miles wide, and the bottom of this craft had dimples that were 50 feet across, the dimples. And through the scope of his gun, which he had in his hand, he looked up and couldn't see any seams. So they were 50 foot across and 50 foot apart. And this thing is 3 miles wide, and somewhere, you can find a videotape or a YouTube tape of this thing. And so in the ensuing days, after Ricky goes public, he encounters men in black driving up his ranch road and standing out there daring him to engage them. And of course, he's got a family in there, and he has no idea. He's a rancher. He doesn't know men in black from, Venus. So he describes this fully, the guy's dress and how many visits he had and that kind of thing. So, was somebody putting him on? Was somebody trying to, extend a myth? I don't know. But I can tell you that, as recently as the Stevensville Lights, Ricky Sorrells had visitors who were dressed, and he described, which other people identified as men in black. So it seems to me, it's like, well, we're still here, shut up, and, we're going to scare you just enough, to buy your silence. That's how I view them. And hopefully I'll never meet one that actually comes up to me first. I basically come up to them because I think it's hilarious.
I don't know how I would react if all of a sudden, I talked about something on this show that got me a little bit of a visit, or all of a sudden a black Cadillac or something parked outside my door and zoom lenses coming in or whatever it could be. I really don't know if I would be as calm as you. I mean, in one way, and not to sound, exuberant, but I think I would be excited about it that I'm being followed by these guys. But I think when reality set in, I would probably be scared stiff. I'm not sure what my reaction would be, but my book is out there. I'm hoping that if they exist, they've read it and see that, I've opened up a new theory, some new theories there. I found some new evidence. I've put some pieces together that previously weren't put together and couldn't have been put together because I was central to those stories and to identifying evidence. And so that's one of the things that makes my book unique. There's information in there that was never published. In fact, if we still have time here in the first hour, I'd like to tell you a Stanton Friedman story about my book. I would love a Stanton Friedman story, and we have to get into him a little bit because when we talked about Roswell and the San Augustine crash earlier on in this program, in the first half hour. And I have had Gerald Anderson on this show, who witnessed the crash as a 5-year-old, as well as Renee Karkin, who is investigating it, as well as Art Campbell. And Stanton Friedman has totally clashed with that entire story and that entire investigation plan in regards to what happened at San Augustine. So I think we need to get into that pretty heavy in the next half an hour after the break. What do you say about that?
Great. And the break will be coming up?
In about 2 minutes. We just have
great.
2 minutes time, my friend. That's just the way it rolls.
And I can do that. I can do that. And we'll just leave a cliffhanger. At the International UFO Congress this year, just weeks prior to that happening, my book was published. And a friend of mine is Yvonne Smith, who's one of my endorsers. And she said, wonderful, bring 36 copies with you, and you can share my table. And in return, while I'm off running the experiencer sessions, you can babysit my table and help sell my books, which I was perfectly happy to do. Well, guess whose table we were next to for the entire week? Stanton Friedman. Wonderful man. I had plenty of opportunity to talk to him, and when we come back from the break, I'll tell you about how he and I traded books, the circumstances that had happened, and the conversation that we had regarding Gerald Anderson and the crash on the plains of San Augustine.
Well, that's an interesting crash site, because it is the forgotten one of the Roswell incident. That's the one that was pushed under the rug like dust muddies when company is quickly coming over unexpectedly. It's amazing how that one was just swept right under. I mean, and yet they celebrate Roswell every year, and there's no mention of it. No mention.
I addressed it in my book in a chapter all about the plains of San Augustine crash and what it means and the evidence. And again, we can get into that. And I hate to give all of these unabashed sales pitches for the book, but...
Well, I'm going to get you to hold on. The music is playing. We're going to step out. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. Ray Szymanski is our guest. 50 Shades of Grey. Get it on sale on Amazon right now. We'll be back.
Looking for news beyond the mainstream news? Head to spacedoutradio.com and check out the SOR Spacewire. This is Spaced Out Radio's Eric Markham, news director for the SOR Spacewire. Daily, I will bring you intriguing stories and outlandish reports from what's going on around the world. UFO sightings, paranormal activity, conspiracies, alternative health, and so much more. And if you have news, email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries, so tune in at spacedoutradio.com.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where 2 members of our team will be available to answer your questions.
Have you ever wondered about those weird and strange creatures people have reported throughout history? Do you wonder if those stories are real? Me too, and that's why I started Cryptopia.us. Hey, this is Rob Morphy, crypto historian. Join me once a month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will get into the odd and bizarre reports, from the Dover Demon to hairy hominids and everything in between. I will break down what people like you and me are seeing at spacedoutradio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com. for mind, body, and spirit. And expect a miracle.
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest. From Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird? Right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Oh, there's only one way to rock. Loud and proud. In high definition. Radio 702 rocks. Las Vegas.
Have you ever had an extraterrestrial experience? One you just couldn't explain? Well, maybe I can help. Hello, I am Samantha Mullet. On the second Tuesday of each month, I will join Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio to bring a human aspect to ET contact. It's something I've lived with my entire life, and I'd love to help you understand. Let's share our experiences. The ET Experience, the second Tuesday of each month, only on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there, this is Jolene with Reveal Reiki and Readings, and I want you to relax. Let me help you chill out and get in touch with your body, mind, and soul. In this busy world, sometimes we need to let go, and this is where I can help. Visit my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr&r.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness. You can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is your psychic medium, Joanna, and I would love it if you would join us every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. With host James Tyson, we'll bring you personal psychic messages on two mediums and a large. Questions about love, life, career changes. We would love it if you would come and join us live. Call in and listen in for the experience. Allow us to open the doors to your other side. Two mediums and a large, heard only on Spaced Out Weekend at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Do you have a topic or a guest that you'd like to hear on Spaced Out Radio? Let us know at spacedoutradio.com, where you can sign up to become a Space Traveler member today. Or you can find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on our Facebook page, Spaced Out Radio Show. Welcome back to hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. Good to have you along for tonight's ride as we continue along the ET Highway here. Tonight's password in the SOR Space Travelers, set by Bill Cardwell, is enigmatical. Enigmatical is your password for tonight. He actually made one I could pronounce. Thank you, Bill, for taking it easy on me after coming off that migraine last night. I do want to apologize to all our listeners. I know I don't have to. You've already said that, but I had to skip last night's show. I came down with a migraine a couple hours before the show, and luckily A good session of Reiki helped me out, and a lot of sleep. I ended up getting some sleep last night, and I am all better today. So thank you so much for your patience, and unfortunately me having to cancel last night's show due to a migraine, but we're off and running tonight. Tomorrow night on the show, the Paranormal Housewives of California are going to join us. We're going to talk about this all-woman paranormal team, and Kristen A. Thorne, who has been a guest on this show, her group, the Paranormal Housewives, will be with us 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. Remember, if you're a listener on Revolution Radio, the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you. Do us a favor, donate today. We want to say hello to everyone listening in also tonight on the Wolf Spirit Radio chat room. We appreciate you guys taking the time to be with us as well. You know who you are. Thank you so much for being along for the ride. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, you can join up for the SOR Space Travelers Club. It is only $5 a month. With that, you get access to a private section on our website, access to private group interviews, your name put into monthly prize draws, and so much more. Check out the SOR Space Wire if you want the latest and weird news. You can read my latest blog and the blogs of our teammates. Mine is on Bigfoot this week. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with the author of 50 Shades of GREYS. Yes, aliens we're talking. Ray Szymanski is our guest. Ray, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Dave. It's awesome.
Right before the break, we kind of teased the audience that, for many who don't know, there was 2 crashes in New Mexico. Roswell is the famous one. The little-known one is San Agustin. And to be honest with you, I had no clue this crash exists until I had, about a year and a half ago, Art Campbell on the show, which led to Renee Karkin, which led to a gentleman named Gerald Anderson, who at 5 years old, him, his father, his cousin, and his uncle, and his brother, actually walked up on this crash site while they were looking for agates in the mountains. And it's an amazing crash site that has been swept under the rug. They were there for 30 minutes before the military arrived. What do you know about San Agustin?
Well, I've had several conversations with Gerald Anderson, and I've had many conversations and information exchange with Art Campbell. Renee Karkin is a friend of mine. She's overwhelms my email box with a lot of stuff. She's very productive. And the story is that, as you mentioned, Gerald was 5 years old, and he was on the plane to San Agustin, which is a couple hundred miles outside of Roswell. And they came across the crash craft. The military came along shortly. There were indications that a government surveyor by the name of Barney Barnett was out there. There was indications that there was an archaeological professor out there with a group, and they saw the crash. They saw the craft come down the night before, so they made a trek over, when daylight happened. And so there were supposedly several witnesses in addition to Gerald Anderson. Well, the issue with Roswell is this. So many people depend on Roswell as their cash cow. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this. And it's not their fault. They did a lot of very good research. They brought this story out when it had been buried for 30 years by the government. They wrote fantastic books. They've got a museum. But there's a lot of money tied up in Roswell. And most of the people who are into UFOs cut their teeth on Roswell. So it's basically a sacred cow. Well, along comes the story of a second crash craft. Now, how could that have happened? Imagine 2 spacecraft coming together. The unstoppable object hits the unmovable object, and they tear holes in each other. One falls in Corona, 70 miles north of Roswell, and the other one rebounds. It catches some energy, and it flies out of control and crashes on the plains of San Agustin. So what you have in Roswell is you have a very handy workforce. You have all those airmen doing their jobs, and suddenly they've got to go pick up this silvery trash on the Foster Ranch in Corona, New Mexico. And there were witnesses to this happening. And so they bring those guys out and they bring all the material back. Meanwhile, on the same evening, a second crash happens on the plains of San Agustin. Well, there is no handy workforce nearby. I don't know how many hundreds of miles it was to the nearest base, but the best that they could do was, get a few troops, a few trucks out there, take what they could, and bulldoze the rest into the plains of San Agustin. Where Roswell was picked clean, that's not what they could do out on the second site. So Gerald tells a story, and I quite honestly don't know how the whole plains thing came to fruition. If I dig deep, I think somebody told the Roswell story, and Gerald saw it in the newspaper and said, hey, maybe they're talking about my crash. And then he discovered, no, it's Roswell, and he knew he wasn't in Roswell. So suddenly he contacted probably Stanton Friedman, who then interviewed him and fully believed this story. So we're kind of up to speed there. Yes, there was a second crash. And you mentioned Art Campbell, and he had a partner, Chuck Wade. And for a decade or so, they went out to a site that Stanton Friedman had pointed out to him by Gerald Anderson. And they went and they did this archaeological dig every summer, and they discovered little pieces of metal, which they eventually had tested by the proper laboratories with high-tech equipment. And the bottom line, I believe the book, it's a spiral-bound book put out by Art Campbell, and it was called Finding the UFO Crash at San Agustin. The results of the test were conclusive, and the conclusion that they came to is the isotopic ratios of the material as tested and proven by independent laboratories is that this material was more than likely not made on planet Earth. So if you think about this, you have a second crash site that's not the cash cow, that's not the Holy Grail, that's not been in the public consciousness since 1979 or whenever the crash at Corona came out. Suddenly, you have a second crash site that not only is reasonable and documents prove that there were other witnesses besides Gerald there, you have more evidence available than has been dug up in Roswell since 1979. You have material from the crash site, which was dug up and conclusively proven not to be of this Earth.
I have the book in my hand right now that Art Campbell actually signed for me. And this crash, do you believe the theory, because that's all we can call it, is that these two spacecraft collided over New Mexico as a result of not only the heavy radar during that time with all the nuclear testing going on, but also maybe as a result of weather, because that night there was supposedly a very large lightning storm going on, and they think between the radar, at least this is what Gerald Anderson told me, he believes in his theory that between the radar that was going on combined with the thunderstorm and the lightning that was going, that maybe lightning hit one of them, they ended up colliding. One crashes in San Agustin, the other one crashes in Corona, which becomes the Roswell incident. What is your theory on that?
Both of those are plausible. Rather than lightning striking the craft, I would think that maybe radar and or the lightning caused a glitch in the navigational capabilities. And these things are moving at 100 times the speed of light, there's, what kind of Earth distance they could travel in just a couple of seconds, right? We're talking, nanoseconds. So if they just had a very small glitch in only one of the navigational systems, for whatever reason, a collision is certainly possible. And the conditions were right to give you more than one reason for that interference to have happened. So, Gerald's theory is as good as any. I certainly would buy that. My bachelor's degree is in electrical engineering, so I have a little bit of background in those type of things. Certainly plausible. So I'm not sure that you're aware of this, but, Chuck and Art had been out there for several years, and they were finding small pieces of debris. And finally, Gerald said, well, guys, I'd love to go out there and hunt with you. Have you ever used a metal detector? And Art and Chuck said, no. And Gerald was like, you got to be kidding me. So in 2011, Gerald joins them. And they show him where they've been prospecting for these pieces and where they've dug stuff up. And Gerald said, and this is just crazy to think that all this time went by and Gerald didn't participate in the dig, but there were some things that were going on in the background, and we'll get to those because I want to get back to the story of how Stanton Friedman got a copy of my book, and it involves Gerald in some way. So he goes out there in 2011, and he takes a metal detector with him, finds out where they're digging, and said, boys, you're close, but no cigar. And he goes over 100 yards away, and suddenly the metal detector goes crazy. And they dig up all this new material, honeycomb material, and just, and it was like a aha moment for everybody because and the debunkers, the skeptics, the people who absolutely make no contribution whatsoever to not only ufology, but they're just a waste of space and a waste of oxygen on this planet, in my estimate. And here comes the hate mail, and I'm going to love it. They say, well, Gerald planted the material. Impossible. It was done under strict controls, and this material was eventually tested to be not of this planet. So if Gerald planted the material, it only strengthens his case because it means that Gerald had found material not made of this planet when he was 5 years old, stored it away for 60-some years, and then brought it out of hiding when he decided to go on an expedition with these people. So listen closely, debunkers. If Gerald Anderson planted that material, it was not of this planet, and he had kept it hidden for 60 years. So not a possibility, not under the controls that were in vogue when they went out to do this hunt. So it was a ta-da moment, an aha moment. And, Gerald had nothing to gain by this. Gerald didn't write a book that I know of. He wasn't doing a tour. He was just trying to recollect some dignity, because is this a good moment for you to get into the Gerald Anderson phone bill controversy?
We can get into it, and I think our audience needs to know a little bit more about Gerald, because when he had this sighting, he was only 5 years old. And when he spoke on this show in January of 2015, this was the first show that he had done in over 22 years, because he felt like he was absolutely ostracized for coming out and saying what he saw. And he had people coming through, and he said this on the air, he had people coming through to him and up to him saying, there is no way you could remember any of that at 5 years old. Obviously, your imagination is playing, you've overstretched some of these stories. But on the flip side, he lived on a base. His father was a technician on a military base. And he would run around like all the rest of the kids going to the military swimming pool because he had passes, and he would be forewarned, everything. So I would love for you to tell a little bit more story, if you don't mind, about who Gerald Anderson is.
I wish I could share that with you. I've had some private conversations with Gerald, and unfortunately, I'm going to keep them there. But what I think I can share is that, Gerald Anderson came out with these claims, and he came out of nowhere because he'd seen a show on television. I think that's what it was. He saw a show on television, and he thought they were talking about his crash. And when he contacted those producers, he discovered it was Roswell and not the plains of San Agustin. And I think the producers were connected to Stanton Friedman. And then he talked to Stanton and told his story. And the reason that I think he was so reviled is because this would have directed attention away from the Roswell cash cow. And there were people who took huge exception to him, like Kevin Randall and others, because they were getting gobs of attention. I'll say that much. I don't know how much money they were making, but they were getting gobs of attention over their connection in the books they wrote about Roswell. So here's a guy coming out going, well, there's enough story for us to share. It's possible because I know when I was, where I was. Unfortunately, I don't have the evidence I need. And they thought he was a poacher. So here was the downfall, and I think this is a good time to segue into that. Gerald got angry with Kevin Randall, and he thought he could cast aspersions on Kevin by showing that Kevin was putting out false information. So what Gerald did, and this is a huge mistake, because Kevin wouldn't accept the story, he wanted to prove to the world that Kevin had not interviewed him long enough to get all the facts. So Gerald fabricated a phone bill that would show that he didn't talk to Kevin for an hour. It would show he only talked to him for like 30 minutes. And that was a terrible thing to do. So eventually they contacted the researchers, I think Stanton among them and Kevin. They went ahead and got the actual bill, and it proved that Kevin was correct. That had been at least an hour of an interview. Well, because Gerald had little evidence for years, other than going back in 2011 and finding the motherlode of all of this material that tested to be extraterrestrial, he had nothing at that point except memories. And that really, everyone turned against him. In fact, Stanton Friedman turned against him. And Stanton was his ally, wrote him up in the book. Interviewed him, had him polygraphed, which he passed with flying colors. So fast forward now, and even in his book, Stanton did revisions saying, I have to change my mind. I have to back away from my support of Gerald Anderson. Fast forward to 2015, the International UFO Congress. Stanton Friedman is occupying the table at the expo immediately next to Yvonne Smith's. Now, my book has 4 wonderful people, 4 world-class experts who are my endorsers, and their endorsements are found on the back cover of the book. The first is Nick Pope. Everybody knows him and loves him. Yvonne Smith, same thing with Yvonne. She's been one of the world's top regressionists for years. The person who put the Roswell movie together, Paul Davids, and the person who wrote the UFOs over Topanga Canyon, UFOs over Arizona, Preston Dennett. So Yvonne's table is up front, sits right next to Stanton Friedman, and he and I conversed every chance we get. Well, there was a moment when lunch was over, the crowd went back to the expo. His table partner, Kathleen Martin, everyone knows her, she goes off and takes a break, maybe grabs a lunch. And I get on the other side of Stanton, and I want to have a low-key conversation because I want to ask him a key question about the plains of San Agustin. And by that point, Stanton had already grabbed a copy of my book, and we had exchanged books, and there's a funny story that we'll get to later. I said, Stanton, here's something I got to know. You first supported Gerald Anderson, then you backed out on him, And I wrote a little section in my book about that incident. And I got to know now, it's too late for my book for this edition, but what's your current stance on Gerald Anderson? Was he at a crash site on the plains of San Agustin? And with the famous pause, he strokes his beard, like, okay, you've published a book, you're one of us now, I'm going to level with you. And he says to me, he really made me angry with all that telephone bill business. It was totally unnecessary. He didn't need to do it. I understand why he did it, but it was really stupid. But yes, Gerald Anderson was there. Gerald Anderson was at a crash site on the plains of San Agustin.
What do you think?
So for me, happened to what?
All the crash. Because if I go back in time and I recall what Gerald told me, he saw the beings, he saw the ship, he touched the ship, and as hot as it was outside, that ship was ice cold. He touched the Greys,
right.
One that was alive, one that was wounded, one that was dead, and there were a couple dead. And his father said, no, don't touch them. What do you think happened to all of those bodies and that ship?
They would have taken that material to whatever place was set up to do the evaluation. Would Wright-Patterson have been a good place? Of course, because, they're still the center of aeronautical engineering at the time. They had everything that we talked about before. They had the personnel. They had the secrecy oaths. They had the classified places they could do it. They had equipment. They had money. They had contracting. They could hire people that they needed if they didn't have the right expertise. So the only issue they would have to grapple with would be the logistics, how they would get it there. And again, they would keep it under wraps. They've already had the Roswell experience, and, they've already been through it once. So I think it would have been just pro forma. They would have done what they've done before, maybe brought in some of the same people who had helped get the first shipment to Wright-Pat and taken it to Wright-Patterson. Absolutely no reason to think otherwise.
And yet Gerald's story really hasn't changed.
I'll tell you what the amazing thing is. I interviewed Gerald, and I would have to go. I have an interview notebook here that I take copious notes, and now I ask people if I can record them. So I do that because my note taking is good, but it leaves a lot of holes. And I took massive notes of Gerald and talking to him. And I have to tell you that when I overlay that on the interview that I heard, because it was posted on your website, Renee pointed it out to me. When I overlaid that on my notes, it was eerily and extraordinarily close. It is as if Gerald had memorized that narrative and has it totally stone cold memorized. I mean, word for word. There were phrases in there that I wrote down that were exactly what he told you. Now, does he have it memorized? Is it part of who he is? He's a police officer. He's got great memory. He has great recall. Is it that he told his story so many times? I've done several interviews in the past couple of weeks. If you overlay what I say, there's going to be a little bit of correlation, but it depends upon who's asking me the questions. I was amazed at how much of repetition there was between, again, my notes and your interview. So I don't know what that tells me about Gerald Anderson, but it's awfully spooky to me. And, maybe there's some psychiatrist or some psychologist who can cut through it and tell us all what it means. But his story is extraordinarily consistent, if anything.
And yet the credibility that Gerald has is far and few between. I mean, he felt so burnt by everybody in that they were so nice to him to take them to the site to show, evidence of where the ship was and where things had crashed, where the military came in. He did a play-by-play for many people in that area. And then it was almost like, in the way he felt and the way he described it here, and maybe I'm taking it that way, is that he was just dropped like an empty can into a bucket, of recyclables. And okay, we've got everything we want from you. Your story of your sighting is really not of importance anymore. Now we've got to find the evidence. And lo and behold, they actually found some metal material that the military had left behind that was still deep in the ground. Do you feel that happened to him, and do you think that's why he went silent for so long?
Oh, absolutely. He had absolutely nothing to gain. It was affecting his personal life. It was affecting his professional life. He was known as a guy who made these outlandish claims. And, as Art Campbell said, and I don't know what the old adage is, but, he crossed swords with the guy who bought printing ink by the barrel. And he's talking about Kevin Randall. And not that Kevin doesn't write great books, but the fact is he's a former intelligence agent. Okay, so think about that for a while, always know your source. And he came down and he made money off Roswell. And his buddies, that he wrote books with, made money off Roswell. They're still making money off of Roswell. So Roswell, this sacred, cash cow, and how dare you, move focus away from Roswell. I, in my book, took a little bit different approach, and I said, ladies, there is absolutely no evidence. I mean, there's no proof. There's no proof of any extraterrestrial craft or recovery from Roswell other than Jesse Marcel's testimony. Zero proof. Yet y'all have been riding that horse for years. But on the plains of San Agustin, okay, Roswell has evidence, lots of smoke and the acrid smell of burning wood. But the plains of San Agustin, in my estimation, if you can believe the high-tech evaluation of the materials, has proof. It's not evidence. It's the proof that everybody has been looking for. So if I'm making money from story A and story B comes out and it has proof and I'm nervous. I'm very, very nervous. I might be invested in things that are all Roswell, and I'm going to squash that. Plus, I've now got a big fat target with concentric circles on his back because he forges a telephone bill. But now, in my estimation, he goes out there with a metal detector and takes guys to a site, and then they test that metal, and they find out that it's not of this planet. Nobody found it in 10 years. He goes out there, and on the first day, they load up a sack of this stuff. To me, he's exonerated. So I like the story. And in my book, what I wrote is I kind of put the olive branch out there. I said, look at folks, Roswell is still a great story. There's still lots to investigate. However, if I follow, as a scientist of 4 decades, if I follow the evidence and the proof, it leads me to the plains of San Agustin. And if that's the case, we now need to build a museum out there because there's enough space out there to build it, and there's enough glory to share between Roswell and San Agustin. And in fact, I think it makes both stories stronger because they happen around the same time frame. So why Roswell would fight it, the Roswellians, I don't know. It makes their case even better.
Unless it's just about profit. Because every year, that's what brings people in there, much like the Mothman prophecies in Point Pleasant in West Virginia. They have a big week-long celebration of the Mothman, and Roswell does the exact same thing. And I agree with you, by the way. It would bring so much more to address what happened at San Agustin, yet they refuse to do that. And it makes me scratch my head wondering, what is the whole cover-up of the San Agustin thing? Because obviously, if the public won't even match it, and the tourism won't even admit its existence, then there has to be, lack of a better term, some conspiracy at play here.
And, what's the motivation? My best friend says, man does nothing unless there's sex and money involved, or one of those. Well, I'm not sure what's going on in Roswell sex-wise, but there is a lot of money involved here. Lots of books. Many people have made their reputation by writing a Roswell book. And again, I don't know how much money they're making, but they're always guest speakers at these big international conferences, and they're being all flown around and getting free hotels and food stipends and, opportunities to sell their books. Sounds to me like a gravy train, and it's built upon zero proof. And I write that in my book. There is zero proof. There's lots of evidence, and that's what makes me a believer. There is zero proof, except, of course, for, Jesse Marcel's word. And for me, it's I'm thinking it's about the money. Unless, of course, there's a lot of sex going on in Roswell that neither you or I know about.
Yes.
That's for another show.
The Roswell alien orgy that happens every year, and doesn't happen in San Augustine, that's for sure. Let's move on a second here, because I think we've beat this topic up pretty hard here. In regards to UFO researchers, there's a lot of people out there, especially with the way social media has exploded over the last 5 to 8 years, that it's really brought a whole attention into UFOlogy, paranormal, all sorts of weird and strange, if we include the cryptids like Bigfoot, Dogman. But let's focus on the UFOlogy field here for a second. We see things like YouTube and the CGI that people are putting on YouTube. Do you believe that a lot of this is being done as disinformation rather than people trying to get their 15 minutes of fame and saying, oh, look what I got on camera?
That's a tough question. I think there's a lot of folks who want their 15 minutes of fame because they're going to show how creative they are. And, they're making money too because they've got a website that their videos are driving the traffic to. So every time someone clicks on their webpage, the cash register goes ching ching. And so, again, the motivation is cash. I got this fabulous thing. I got 1 million hits. I don't know how much money that generates because I don't have a Facebook account at this point, and I don't have a website at this point. And I won't get into why, but those kind of people are making money, pure and simple. Now, are there disinformation specialists out there? I would think that you have to use some discretion and apply it to a particular instance. For example, let's say the Stevensville Lights. Soon as the Stevensville Lights, come on, and you've got the constable saying he saw it, and his deputy saw it, and a reputable business guy who saw it, and a rancher who said, this thing sat over my head. And then you see stuff that comes out in reference to it. You get, and I'm not going to mention their names because they're annoying and they don't deserve any airtime, but there's a handful of debunkers that are always brought out on these TV shows and these pseudo documentaries, and they come out and go, well, it's Venus expanded by a hot air balloon, and it's spontaneously combusted beer flatulence, and it's bullcrap. When you see videos and pictures and narrative that come out for a specific incident, it's easy to cut through it, and it's disinformation and misinformation. But somebody who's just throwing up a video saying, there's a triangular craft, which happened in May at Wright-Patterson, and there's this craft over the thing, and it's this balloon, and you'll find it on our website, and, people have accused us. That's just people trying to drive traffic to the website. So I think it's easy for the savvy consumer and the savvy researcher and somebody who's knows their history to easily cut through the crap.
I have a couple questions from our audience here, if you don't mind, Ray, as we speak with Ray Szymanski, author of 50 Shades of GREYS. Can be found at any major bookstore or online at Amazon. Let's start with This question from Jin in the Revolution Radio chat room. Have you ever done any studies on the UFO crash outside Kingman, Arizona?
I have not. Unfortunately.
Is that something you would probably look into?
You know, I'm going to focus on my follow-up book is going to be more about Wright-Patterson because I'm being told things through sources that I trust, and I can pretty much document it, you know, to make me a believer of it. And I'm doing another book on contactees. So I probably will not be researching that in the near future because my focus is on these other two areas right now. And there's only so much I can do. I'm one person. So my apologies.
Next question comes from Joe in the SOR Space Travelers Club. He is asking, why are UFO researchers their own worst enemies?
I guess I need to know who he's talking about specifically. If it's me, then I'd like him to ask me, you know, where I've fallen on my sword.
No, it isn't so much about you, but it's more so along the lines that there doesn't seem to be a lot of credibility in the field of ufology. You know, like years ago, the old crowd, the Stanton Friedmans and everybody like that, they seem to really own the circuit. Then there's this secondary younger group who's coming in, and the ideas of those researchers seem very far-fetched that people almost don't believe the stories. I mean, classic example, the whole ancient aliens theory that's very popular now.
Right. I think a lot of the people who are in the field want to stay visible, and they want, you know, it's an ego trip. They're making money. In fact, in my book, I take two major researchers, very well-known people, to task for fabricating a story. And they close their book with the story saying, you know, Mr. So-and-so is, you know, I'm the base commander, and they're not coming on my base, and all that. And the way I know the story was fabricated is because at the time the story was taking place, the person they're quoting in the book was my boss. Because I was working for the base commander as a direct report at that time. So I knew the story was complete BS, and what I did is he was a colonel at the time. I contacted him. He's now a general in Washington, D.C. I sent him a copy of those pages, and I said, they're quoting you as, you know, ranting about these guys aren't coming on my base to do the filming. I said, what do you know about it? He said, never heard of these guys. This didn't happen, and the names that they mentioned in the book, I don't know these people. So I actually call out two very, very well-known researchers in my book, and I contacted them personally. And I said, you know, this story's bullshit. And the first researcher said, contact my buddy. He's the one who wrote it. So I did. And he put me off for a handful of months, and finally I had to catch up with him at a conference. And I said, hey, we're face-to-face. This is a phony story. Well, you know, I got it from my source, and, you know, I believe them. I said, no, I'm not buying it. Your name is on the cover of the book. You should have checked out. You should have fact-checked your book. And he blew me off. So I think, you know, in his case, it's an ego thing. You know, he's a big name, and he just wants to stay, you know, on the circuit. And I'm not afraid to call him out. And I wasn't afraid to tell him publicly that that story was bullshit. So you're right. In many cases, they're their own worst enemy, but they are because they got to do something new and exciting, and they want to be the first to, you know, say something and bring it out there, and they don't check the facts. And I have a problem with that, and I don't mind publicly calling them out.
Well, there's someone on this side that I will not name, and a few people I have shared that with in our audience privately in the chat rooms. But I emailed somebody in this top tier of investigators or researchers or whatever you want to call them. And I asked them if they'd like to come on for an interview. I sent a letter similar that I sent to you, seeing if you would like to come on the show, and, you know, which describes what we are like, what we are about, and I think we provide a pretty attractive package. I didn't get, in the response letter that email that I got back, I didn't get a hi, how are you, what time do you broadcast, how long, anything like that. the note basically said, Mr. So-and-so would like to know how many listeners you have per night before he commits to anything. And I looked at that, and I thought, you jerk. Right? Honestly, I thought, you jerk, that is not even worthy of my response. Now, I know I don't have the audience of, say, coast to coast. I know that. Okay? I got about 1,000 people a night listening to me. They've got about, 3-4 million. It's a big difference. But my theory on this is, and my thoughts on this, Ray, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. The reason why I never responded to that email, I was so insulted for each and every one of my listeners because they've made an emotional connection to this show. They know we run a professional quality program. And for this person to slap my audience in the face by asking that question, is it really about the message you were trying to get across? Or is it about your own personal being? Because if it's about the message, you shouldn't care if it's 10 listeners, 100 listeners, 1,000 listeners like we have, or the 3 million listeners. It should be about the message and getting as many people out there to talk about it as possible. And that's why I will never have this person on the air, even if I meet him face to face.
Stanton Friedman and I traded books at the International UFO Congress. He was sitting there and he was watching the book sales. The books were just flying off the table. And the reason was one of my endorsers was the pre-lunch presenter. It was Paul Davids. And during his presentation, he said, hey, I had lunch with Ray Szymanski. His book is here. He only brought 36 copies. You better get one after lunch. And the line was out the door. So Friedman's watching this go along, and he grabs like the last saleable copy. And he goes, wow, this is really interesting. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll trade your book for any one of mine. So we trade books, and I got a photograph. It's really cool. He's such a nice man, and he's holding my book. I'm holding his book. And, of course, we talk about that for the rest of the week. So now a couple of weeks go by, and he tells me, he said, I'm going to read your book on my flight back to New Brunswick, wherever he lives. And so I sent him an email, and I said, have you read my book? And he said, I'm halfway through it. He goes, and I'm really enjoying it. He said, this is very interesting, and you've covered a lot of ground here. He goes, it's just amazing. And I said, well, thank you very much, just let me know when you're going to finish it. And then he goes, and he gives me a list, a laundry list of all the things he's got to do in the next couple of weeks. He's on this show, he's on this show, he's writing this, he's doing this. And he goes, I really hope I can get back to your book sometime soon. So the point of all this is, other than telling your audience that Stanton Friedman loves my book, is there are some people that are so busy that they get to pick and choose, and I know this isn't right, they get to pick and choose whose show they're going to be on and what documentary they're going to use, and they're freaking just exhausted. And Stanton, I hope it's not him, he's 84 years old, or, he's in that stratosphere. So some of these people have to be picky. Now, if it wasn't somebody of his stature and his age, then, shame on them, because it should be about the message. And, I don't care if I give a presentation in a library and there's 5 people there, it's terrific, because I'm getting to get the message out. Hopefully somebody will buy a book or two. And then there's always someone in the audience who goes, hey, I know this great guy, Dave Scott, and this is what happened to, you and I. You've got to get on this show. And it happened. And I only had 24 people in the audience that day. I don't care. So shame on that person if they weren't Stanton Friedman.
It wasn't Stanton Friedman, I can tell you that. He has been on this show. And it
wonderful. Yay.
Yes.
He's a great guy. I love him to death. And of all the researchers, and there are many that I found that have great integrity, dollar for dollar, pound for pound, Stanton is the guy who I think has the highest level of integrity. He's made mistakes, but he does his homework, he knows his history, and I would take his word to the bank.
I'm curious in regards to your own research. What makes a good UFO researcher and what doesn't? And the reason why I asked that, I've talked to a number of researchers, and the one pattern that I am finding lately, Ray, is that a lot of researchers out there no longer care about the experience. Let me rephrase that. I don't think it's that they don't care about the experience, but I believe that they are no longer putting any trust or faith into the experience people are having because they just feel it's not as relevant as the popular topic of disclosure or government officials like Bob Lazar or an astronaut coming out saying that there's UFO activity around NASA, something along those lines. They seem to have pushed the experiencer to the wayside. Do you find that as well?
I think, if I understand what you're saying, is the experiencers are telling their stories, and they're being documented in books like, They Walk Among Us, which is the new one that just came out, or Yvonne Smith's book, Chosen, or Coronado, people who have been abducted. That's the group we're talking about, right?
Yeah, we're talking about, for instance, there's a lot of experiencers out there who have basically been told, and I've talked to them, and I'm not going to mention names because I know a few of them are listening right now. Okay, where they've been told, you know what, your story is great, I've heard that type of story before, but really, unfortunately, it's irrelevant to our research.
Oh, absolutely not. I think that's totally wrong. Who has been closest to the phenomena? Somebody whose uncle had a plumber, who had an electrician, that knows a fireman, that said he worked at Wright-Pat and was led into a vault. And sure, they just didn't cover the craft that day. So you saw the craft and the aliens, and they swore you to secrecy, and then it gets published in a book. Or is it the person who goes, I'm an abductee. I have been implanted, with some sperm and some alien DNA, and I have seen my children on a spacecraft, and I have regular children here, and who's been closest to the phenomena? It's the person who's the experiencer. So, if you give me an experiencer in one corner telling me the story, and a guy who's telling me about the fireman electrician connection, I'm going to blow that guy off. I'm all ears for the experiencer. So I can't speak for the other people. I don't know who they've talked to or what the problem is, or maybe they can't make money off of it. I don't know what the issue is. But for me, I am super interested in the experiencer story. And maybe that's why I've hit it off so well with Yvonne Smith, is because, that's her work. And, I can listen to her talk for hours. And I have. So I don't understand the other problem. And in fact, one of my future books is going to be about experiencers. And I love talking to them, and I love doing the research.
In about an hour, I'm going to probably have a treat for you after the show if you want to stay up a little bit later.
Sure, absolutely.
We have a friend of this show. His name he goes by Audrey. And Audrey is not from here. And I have vetted this person personally. So I will see if Audrey...
Please don't tell him where I live.
I will see if Audrey wants to hook up with us on the phone afterwards for you to say hello, because his story is very, very incredible. And
I'd love to do that.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen an ET?
I'd love to do that. Personally?
Yes.
No. I have not, and you know what? I'm good. It's like I run marathons, and my friends run 100-milers, and they go, oh, you got to join us someday. No, just tell me your stories, man. I'm good. I can't get my head around that. So I'm good without it, but I'm still intrigued with the phenomena. I know, it's weird. But
I've seen 5.
No, I'm not ready.
I have. And one of them during this show, April 15th, 2015, I was broadcasting about Buddha of all topics. 10 minutes into the interview, I saw something move out my window. Put my microphone on mute. I looked out my window. and I damn near fell off my chair when I noticed that there was a gray staring back at me.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Well, see, you know they're real. You know, the closest I came is I saw a spaceship 200 feet in front of me, about 75 foot off the deck, and I recount the entire story with photographs, not of the ship, but more of an artist rendition of that experience. So people claim I'm an experiencer because I saw a craft at close range. You know, I don't volunteer under that definition. I think it goes well beyond that. But obviously, you are an experiencer, and that's just extraordinary.
I'm one of the rare ones out there, and I don't mean this to brag or anything, but I'm one of the rare ones out there that actually has a background in broadcasting and is an experiencer as well. So, I mean, my last 4.5 years has been pretty incredible. And like I've said many times on this show, it put a quick end to my happily boring life that I was so much enjoying. You know.
Well, you know Janet and Sasha Lesson, right?
Yes, they've been on this show. They were on the show back in June.
Right, and she's an experiencer and a broadcaster. And I don't know what her background is, if she's been formally trained, but she does a great job of having a guest on, much like yourself, and letting them just, you know, run with it.
Well, that's kind of what we try and do, because the way I look at it is this show is not about me. You know, we're trying to build something where it's about the listeners, and they're not tuning in to hear me. They're tuning in to hear people such as yourselves, and that's why we get people on, such as yourself, to come on and try and explain what the Sam hell is going on around this earth that isn't being talked about on the mainstream. So it's a very good balance, and when you have a good audience like we do here, Ray, I can tell you this: they keep you on your toes with excellent questions. They bring up excellent points, and they bring up a lot of information that you just don't normally think about because you're in the heat of the moment. Like on this side of the microphone, you're in the heat of the moment, you're in the heat of the show, you got the guest on, you're monitoring chat rooms, you're doing everything that would take the job of at least another person as well behind the scenes that we just don't have. So, you know what? I really, really respect the people who listen into these. I'm going to get you to hold on. Ray Szymanski, pardon me, is our guest tonight. 50 Shades of Greys is his book. We're going to talk more ETs, UFOs, right after this. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. We'll be back.
Greetings and salutations, space travelers, from the Chronicles of the Unknown team.
What is Chronicles of the Unknown? I keep hearing about this thing.
It's a new paranormal reality TV show based right here in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. Follow our team as we uncover claims of activity on the Caribou Gold Rush Trail. You can also follow us here every third Monday, where 2 members of our team will be available to answer your questions. We'll give you some equipment updates and some of our experiences on the road, right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with UFOcop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Have you checked out the SOR Spacewire at spacedoutradio.com yet? Every day we post the latest stories regarding the weird, strange, and completely unbelievable. From cryptid and UFO sightings to the conspiracy world, we tackle it all. Hi there, I'm Eric Markham, Spaced Out Radio's news director for the SOR Spacewire. And if you have a story, I want to hear it. Email me at news@spacedoutradio.com.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. Welcome back to hour number 3 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Don't forget, if you're an SOR space traveler, your password is Enigmatical. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight. Enigmatical is your password, so make sure you use it wisely if you are an SOR space traveler. Remember, if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, it is a donation station. The Double R machine is financed by you, the valued listener. Do us a favor and donate today. Remember, if you want to follow up on Spaced Out Radio, you can do so on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. While there, you can sign up for the SOR Space Travelers Club if you haven't by now. It's only $5 a month. With that, you get access to private postings on our website, access to private group interviews, your name put into monthly prize draws, and so much more. You can read up on the SOR Space Wire and the weird and wacky news of the day. Check out our musical god, Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, who takes care of all of our musical needs, and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we are talking with Ray Szymanski. His book, 50 Shades of GREYS, playing off the name title there of a very popular book. Way to go there, Ray.
Thank you. Everyone thinks it's so clever. I don't know where that thought came from, but it turns out you can't copyright a title of a book in the United States and the United Kingdom, so it worked out perfectly.
What made you write it?
You know, I was always interested in the topic, and I retired prematurely in 2011. Kid ran a red light. I hit his car. Then a truck hit me from behind. So I had some nerve issues and a herniated disc, and I was getting blackout headaches. So I thought it was a sign from God, time to retire. And I wanted to make a short list of 3 things I wanted to do. 1, become a UFO investigator. 2, learn how to play the guitar. 3, write a book. So we can take that last one, off the to-do list. So it was something I wanted to do, and if I put it up there, I'm going to do it. I also wanted to get people interested in the topic that wouldn't ordinarily do so because they're always thinking aliens and abductions and spaceships crashing down. Most of the people who read my book say that it is laugh out loud funny because I take you to famous UFO sites and I have a number of misadventures. And, it's embarrassing stuff in some cases, but it's funny. And I just put it in there because I think, I want people to be entertained and educated at the same time. And I think my book does that. So educate, entertain, that was another goal. And then I wanted to make a contribution to the field of ufology. I view that as an impressionist painting, a great Renoir, and, there's a million little dots. And I'm hoping that I can just put a couple little dots on that painting, and eventually we're going to get a perfect masterpiece on what it is that is actually going on. So that kind of tells you what my motivations were and what my goals were for writing the book.
How has it been taken in the UFO field? Because people in this field are so finicky and so fickle with their ideas and their perceptions of what ufology truly is. What was the reaction from people in the know? Now, we know Stanton Friedman loved it, but anybody else that was really coming up to you and saying, hey, how did you get this? Or where did you get this idea? This is pretty good.
So far I don't have any, additional feedback except for the people who were my endorsers, because in many cases they read the draft chapters and gave me feedback and gave me some guidance. But I have found it very easy to trade books with people in the field who said, oh, I've heard about this. I'm so glad you brought a copy, like Richard Dolan, for example. Unfortunately, when I traded a copy with Richard, I'd already had a handful of his books, so I traded him for Bruce Maccabee's book, who Richard's company published. But, Richard was looking forward to reading it. I hope he has. People like Rosemary Guiley. I've got a copy here of a book. I want to make sure that I get her name right. Sherry Wild. Dr. Jacobs, who just wrote a book called They Walk Among Us. He and I traded books, and I actually had dinner with Dr. Jacobs and Yvonne Smith at the International UFO Congress back in February. So when I showed up in June with my book, he was, oh, this is really great. So I'm getting a good reaction. I also traded books with Jim Mars. And so there's a handful of others who said, oh, yeah, I've heard about this. I'm really interested. And, you know, we chat up about Wright-Patterson. I discussed this with Whitley Strieber, also discussed it with George Nuri, and both had said, hey, you got to be on my show. So far, I don't have a response yet. So, you know, I'm probably planned out, 6 months forward. But I'm getting a nice reaction, like, wow, somebody from Wright-Pat who really worked there actually wrote a book about it, and this is so refreshing. Most people never set foot on the base, and, they wrote books, but, how much of that can we really believe? So it's really been a positive response that I've gotten for all the right reasons, and I have a whole bunch of books that I need to catch up on and read.
Oh, for sure. It's a great way to definitely get the product out there as well. What about the UFO community, though? Let's take the names aside. We're talking the experiencers, the people who may not have the popularity. How has that gone for sales with you? Because, like I said, this is a very fickle field when it comes to people and what they read, what they buy, especially if you're new trying to get into the fold and take your research to that different level.
At the International UFO Congress, I launched the book. I sold out the 36 copies that I brought with me in 90 minutes. And it made Stanton Friedman's hair turn white because he couldn't believe why my line was out the door, and he didn't realize that Paul Davids had given me a boost at his presentation. I also took 4 orders where people prepaid me for the book, and I wound up shipping it after I got back from the conference. So I sold 7 books in a matter of a couple of days and could have done more, but they couldn't resupply me in such a short notice. Every time I go to a talk, I think there were 50 people at the North Carolina MUFON chapter meeting that I briefed, and I sold 24 books. So half the people in the audience bought books, and I know several more purchased them afterwards because, they sent me emails because my email address is in there, and it's like, oh, I didn't bring cash, or, I wasn't really, sure about this, but after your talk, I had to run, and I couldn't wait in line to buy a book. And it goes well. I sell a lot of books that when I make a personal presentation or after I do a show like this. I was the winner of the Nonfiction Bestseller Award for the Dayton Book Expo in April. So people show up, there's the 100 authors there, and they pick and choose whose books they want to buy, and at the end of the night, they tally how many books you sell, and then they give you, a nice little etched piece of glass to commemorate, who sold the most books. So it was popular there. I'm going to be... Now, this is something your audience is probably going to take a deep breath on. I am going to be selling my book at the United States Air Force Marathon Expo on the 15th and 16th of this month. So get your head wrapped around this, listeners. The kryptonite of the U.S. Air Force, which is talk about UFOs, I'm actually going to be selling my book at their expo for 2 days. It's going to be at the Wright State University Nutter Center on Colonel Glenn and North Fairfield Road in Fairborn, Ohio. Hours are 11 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. I know a lot of people are going, are you kidding me? An Air Force function, and they're going to let you sell your book? And the answer is yes. So, the response has been great. I wish it was better. I'm not trying to let this thing take over my life, so I've been really picking and choosing what interviews I do and what presentations I make, and I do want to put it out there that the first major conference, like Roswell or International UFO Congress or Contact in the Desert, that offers me a spot on their dais is going to get the real inside scoop and the benefit of my research and the real story on Hangar 18. So I just dropped the bombshell for you. You can thank me later.
Well, I do appreciate that. I'm a little jaw-dropped at that. Thank you for doing that. I got a couple of questions here that I want to get in from Claudia and the SOR Space Travelers Club on Facebook, if you don't mind. She is asking, what UFO story did you, Ray, hear from an experiencer that you felt was so fascinating and credible?
I spent the day with Travis Walton at his abduction site. And we went up there to do a little science experiment and a photo shoot. And that's covered in its own chapter in my book. So Travis met me up in Heber. He got into my 4x4, which I had rented, and we slided our way all the way through the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest on 3 inches of mud. We chased wild horses through the park there, and there's buddy pictures with Travis and I, arm over shoulder, taking photographs at the site where he was basically taken away for 5 days. So having gotten to spend the entire day with him and actually taking photographs of residual evidence, and that evidence is incorporated into a movie by Jen Stein called Travis, and I think it's coming out this fall. So spending the day with him and actually seeing the human side of Travis and talking to him and getting, like, Travis is going, we came up that road. Here's where the car stopped. Here's where the craft was. Here's where I stopped. Here's where we walked. And getting literally a first-person tour of the site, which is still kind of, unknown today, and being able to cross-examine him, and, there was no question he didn't answer. It was a fabulous day. He's a great guy, and I put my finger in the hole of doubt and came out with the truth, and I'm just so convinced that story is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Another question from Claudia here. Ray, what made you get into the field of ufology? Did you have family or friends who had experiences, or was it just a lifelong interest to you?
My very first week of employment at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I had Corvette Al tell me about the aliens in the tunnels. And then when I would use that as sort of a party discussion with somebody and say, hey, what do you know about this? Everyone was, yeah, we do. And, we evaluated them here and just, come read on Project Blue Book. So there was this cultural immersion at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Everybody I asked through the years, oh, yeah, of course, we did this and, this guy was here. And so that just festered for years. And in 2008, I found myself on a trip to Boston, and I had some time in the afternoon, and I went up to Exeter, New Hampshire to do a photo shoot up there and to research it. And I met guys whose fathers' names were mentioned in the famous John Fuller book, Incident at Exeter. So in 2008, I got serious about doing field studies and just immersed myself, finding new evidence, talking to the experts, meeting people that knew stuff that wasn't published before, and kind of like the seed was planted in 1973, and it just hit me in 2008. So I don't know what the trigger was in 2008, probably like, it might have been the sightings in Arizona, but something tripped that switch, and I just started to get into it really heavy.
Joe has a comment in the SOR Space Travelers. He's actually right now been posting some weird lights over top of his house on the Nevada-California border. He's asking, have you ever taken a photo of an unknown aerial object?
No, but in my next book, I'm going to publish at least one of them. A friend that I worked with has a son, and he was out at Chaco Canyon. And he was taking photographs with his granny and some other folks. They got back to the grandmother's house. They threw these things up on a computer screen. They probably took his chip out, or they, connected. It was on a cell phone. And the grandmother noticed and said, what's that spot? And it was one of these buttes, like you see in all these Western movies. And if you've ever been out to Chaco Canyon, which I think is like the best and largest preserved pueblos, in the country, they noticed this dot, and they just blew it up, and they realized that they had this oval-shaped object. So through Yvonne Smith, in fact, she got me in touch with Rick Shaw. He's out of California, and he can do photo analysis. His work is videos and video analysis, so he was a qualified guy to do that. And he said after he looked at it, and he gave me all the technical things. He actually took the photo and drew arrows and paragraphs like Alice's Restaurant. And he said, the last thing I need to know is what about the person who took this photo? Did you vet them? And I had done a couple of hours of interview of the person and the mother, and did the research, and there was no doubt in my mind that this person took and gave me an authentic photograph that they didn't have time nor the equipment to do any adjustment to it, because the photo came out of their phone at the moment they got home. So to me it's authentic. What it is, I don't know, but I've never taken one that I know of, but certainly my friend has, and that was almost going to be the cover of my book, but Nick Pope told me it's too subtle. You don't want to be subtle on your book cover, so that didn't happen, but I'd love to publish it in my next book.
Another question from Claudia here in the SOR Space Travelers, and when she gets going really well with some good questions.
Good by me.
Claudia is asking, Ray, if someone were to have an experience with an alien or UFO, what proof would you need as a researcher to make it credible? Can you give us a list of what you would need before we reported an experience?
Well, at this point, I'm just happy that they believe enough in me to tell me their story. And I actually have people who've claimed to be experiencers who have offered to be the subjects of my upcoming book. So at this point, I'm taking it on faith. But once I get their stories down and I get enough particulars that I can research, then I'll try to verify that on my own. And in fact, what I have suggested and just bantered about, and this is what maybe, after hours we're going to talk about, is I had floated the balloon about genetic testing and whether or not we could find certain blood markers that would differentiate people who claim to be hybrids or aliens or that from the rest of the population. And I'm getting a mixed reaction on that right now. The people who are the researchers tell me, well, it's expensive and it's a great idea. And I just the other day uncovered something from somebody who found blood markers, and they're doing that on people. And instantaneously here, I can't recall what the difference is, but they did find some markers that are unique. What they are now, I just can't recall because I'd only seen the show once. But I recommended or suggested to the people that I want to be part of my research about, okay, if we're going to do this, then we're going to do some DNA testing, and, I need all hands to clasp together and say, break, we're going to do this. So I haven't convinced them yet, but if I had that kind of evidence, then it's more than evidence, it's proof. But just to talk to me and to have somebody tell me their story, I don't really need any evidence at this point. If it's interesting enough, I'll ask more questions and I'll get more factoids and I'll eventually dig into it. But no, you don't need to swear in a Bible to tell me your story.
Do you have plans to write more books about these topics? In regards to, like, are you gonna stay focused on UFOs? Are you going to get more into experiencers or maybe try to expand the whole genre?
I think right now my focus is a follow-up book to Wright-Patterson. I'm going to get enough people to read it and plow some ground, and hopefully someone's going to come out of the woodwork and say, you know what, I've got the story I want to get off my chest, and hopefully I can publish it. I had a guy come up to me in North Carolina, and he said, the story you told us about the man in black being in FTD and, you talked to him on the campus of the intelligence agency and everything else he told us, he said, your story is spot on. And I said, how do you know? And he said, I was an OSI agent for 30 years. I was a senior agent. And you're, if you know your history, the OSI did UFO investigations. So if there were men in black at some time in this man's career, then he would have probably crossed paths with them. But regardless, he was telling me, look, I'm a former OSI guy, and your story's spot on. Now, could he be lying to me? Heck yes. So he's the last guy in line, and he's the last guy buying a book. And so I'm thinking I'm going to be slick, and I go, who do I autograph this book to? Hoping he's going to tell me his name. But he didn't. He gave me a nickname, and he just smiled. And, of course, I autographed the book, and, we parted as friends. So there are people that are coming out and telling me things, so that's why I think I'll have another good book that's more along the line of my first one, and I'm really interested in the experiencer phenomena, and I'd really like to do a book about that too. But if I can't in my heart say I really, really believe their stories, or, I can't get them to cooperate, and I think there's something fishy, then I just won't publish it. It'll just be, something I'll keep to myself.
See,
but I think that's what yeah, go ahead.
What I would love a writer to do, such as yourself, is I would love to see a writer take on the whole blanket of paranormal. Because I truly believe that it's a topic that really no one is talking about, because everybody tries to break off the branches. Okay, we got UFOs here, we got ETs and abduction here, we have ghosts here and demons, and over here we have the cryptids with Bigfoot and Dogman and Frogman and Mothman and whatever man you want to come up with. Okay, but in my own personal experience, Ray, mine went from, in the span of 3.5 years, it went from straight paranormal to cryptid to UFOs to alien encounters. And I am a firm believer, and I know a few of our listeners are as well, that there is some sort of perennial tie in between the whole gamut of paranormal. And it seems like there are very few, if any, people, especially writers, who want to take on that topic to try and find what is the connection between all of these fields. Have you ever thought about something like that?
I have. Now, I am, and I'll use the word friend very loosely here, but, I've had extensive conversation with crop circle people like, say, Patty Greer, who's at the top of the field and has done some wonderful work. I've done the same thing with the experiencer people like Yvonne Smith. I sit through the experiencer sessions that she runs. She actually, with the permission of the client, let me sit through one of her regressions. So I actually got to see this in action. I'm friends with somebody who just published a book. In fact, they just sent me a message. They wrote a book. This is Sandy Harrington, and she wrote a book which it addresses the walk-in phenomena. And so the point I'm trying to get at is that for some reason, somehow, these people have come into my life, some briefly, some have staged, many, I can go back and, we exchange emails on a regular basis. So I'm getting exposure to all these areas, and I'm getting comfortable with areas that I never even thought of before. So I think if I would write a book, it's just going to be by happenstance. It's going to be, oh, well, look at, you really know a lot about this, and you know a lot about that, and a lot about that. And then suddenly, my researcher background is going to kick in, and, theories are going to abound that maybe I can bind all of these areas together. But for me to try to eat the elephant in one bite and go, oh, I'm just going to write a book about this, I just don't think it's practical. I think it would just drive me totally out of my mind. And, I'm retired. I don't need the book sales. I don't have to concoct things to, get speaking engagements at conferences. I'm independent of what happens with these book sales. So I can pick and choose what I want to do and keep it factual, even if it's a bit boring. And I think that's good for the consumer because they're going to know that I've dug everything to the ground and I've researched it. But I just don't have the time at this point in the near future, especially putting together 2 more tomes here, to go, I think I'd like to do that. I think if it happens, it's just going to be like a natural progression from the previous work I've done.
I just think it's some unknown tie. And it makes me scratch my head. My friend Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal, him and I talk about it quite frequently, about what the tie is. And he has some theories, and they make sense, but I'm just not sure if I'm fully 100% convinced, and this is no offense to Eric because I know he's listening right now in the chat room, but I'm just not fully convinced that it's something that simple. Because when I replay everything that has happened to me personally over the last, we're going on 5 years now in December, it absolutely baffles me how it can go from one extreme to another in such an even flow. And that's the whole key issue, and that's the reason why I asked you that question in regards to the whole realm of the paranormal rather than just pieces and snippets of it.
I had a professor who would end every lecture by saying, his name was Dick Bethke, Dr. Bethke, and he was control systems. And he said, every day, there's so much we don't know. And then he put the chalk down. And it's true. There's some of these things that I had no clue about, but it builds as I do a talk and someone comes up to me. Like I'm going to be briefing the Ghost Hunting Society of Dayton in January. And I never thought about that. But it turns out that Wright-Pat has an extraterrestrial haunting, in a hospital that I have access to and photographs of and that they're interested in hearing about. And I'm going to find out more about what they do. So it's kind of like, a snowball rolling down the hill here. Same thing with Sandy Harrington. I didn't know her from Adam, but she showed up at a MUFON conference, a MUFON chapter briefing that I gave. And next thing I know, we're exchanging emails about what she knows and her books. And so, it could come to that. I just don't have that on my personal radar. It's not in my new top 3 list of things to do.
I got another question from Claudia in the SOR Space Travelers Club. She is asking, an experiencer is usually in shock and will not respond in a logical way to collect evidence in the moment. How many stories have you heard, Ray, that you felt was an honest account of what happened to people, but they just do not have the evidence? And how do you believe them?
One of the persons that I'm looking at and interviewing early on to tell their story in my book tells me that every time they go back to the ship, they go back with the thought that they're going to take something back with them. And the experience is such that, and the mind control is such that it never happens because, the person is in somewhat of a vegetative state when they're released, and when they're up there and they're, being experimented on or being who knows what, that thought just disappears. They're like trying to survive or trying to deal with what's going on in the ship. So they forget about it. So there's no evidence. But if you read a book like Coronado by Yvonne Smith, you have several people who were at the conference at the Coronado Hotel on Coronado Island just days before President Clinton was to give a talk there. So the place was crawling with Secret Service agents. And a handful of the people that were known to Yvonne beforehand, because they were in a support group of hers, all claimed that they were abducted during the weekend that the UFO conference was being held in the hotel. And not only did they see people of their support group, but they saw other people in the abduction area, waiting room, whatever they call it, that they recognized were attendees at that same conference. So it's not like they were recalling faces that they saw every month in the Vaughn support group. They actually saw other people on the ship with them who they passed in the hallways of the hotel during that weekend. So here you have a corroboration of, dozens of people who, were interviewed in conscious and subconscious states that said, yes, I recall seeing you there. So are they all crazy? I hardly think so. If one person said, well, I saw 20 of you, and the other 20 said, nah, we didn't see you, but they're all corroborating each other's stories, that has weight with me. And I tend to think, okay, we've got some smoke going on here. So, again, I don't need a piece of the spaceship. There are people who have pieces of the spaceship. That would be great. But there's enough evidence for me to go, look, this is a worthwhile thing for you to pursue. There's enough evidence there. It's interesting enough. And, please tell me your story, because it's going to be a lot more interesting than hearing about, taking your kids to soccer.
Yeah, we don't discuss soccer on this show. If sports was religion, soccer would be the Antichrist, in my opinion, but that's just me. I know I'll take some heat for that one, but I had to get that one out. Ray, I got to ask you, I'm going to be doing my first conference here, speaking in Concrete, Washington in October at the Forest Moon Paranormal Paracon. How much do you enjoy speaking at these conferences?
Never have. I've never been invited, and I have talked to the guy who runs the International UFO Congress, and I haven't gotten a response back from them. I actually had a major person contact the Roswell people. They haven't gotten back to me, and I've contact in the desert, and I know the person who runs it, and apparently I'm not high profile enough. So no response yet, but I still have hopes that maybe Roswell will invite me, because I am the foremost authority on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and UFOs, having worked there for 40 years and done all my research. And since Roswell is all about Wright-Patterson and UFOs, I can't imagine why they wouldn't invite me. And now I'm a published author, so again, I've got some credentials. So what are you driving at here?
I'm just saying that it's time to start talking on this circuit, man.
Oh, I'd love to do one. I haven't been invited yet. So, and I don't go anywhere that I've not been invited. That's Ray's rule number one.
Well, Eric Cooper, who runs Forest Moon Paranormal's Paracon, says if you can make it to Washington State in October, you're more than welcome to come on out and make it happen.
Okay, well, if someone would be so kind as to send me, just a little link to those guys, and I'd be happy to engage them. I do have a couple of things locally going on in October, but, I'm not booked for any conferences at this point, and that might be a great starting point.
Well, actually, I think he's booked up for this year, but he says next year for sure he would have a spot open for you.
Well, next year, just, again, if he would, my email is it's a UFO, ITSA UFO, it's a UFO at yahoo.com. And if he wants to send me something, I'd love the entertainment, and I'll plan for it.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much. Sir.
Do you go to a lot of conferences, though? Have you attended a lot? Or banquets? Because apparently, from what I have read, you have these fan T-shirts you like to wear.
Yes. I started going in 2012. I started off the International UFO Congress, and I've been at that one in 12, 13, 14, and 15, and then I've been at the last 3 Contact in the Deserts, and besides that, I've not gone to any others. And I've been able to make good friends, like Nick Pope and I buy beers for each other. And, I have dinner with Yvonne Smith and her friends and, other folks. I have a great picture of Nick Pope, Yvonne Smith, and Paul Davids, 3 of my endorsers, holding my book at the International UFO Congress. And it was a photo op. It was for marketing purposes, and we all sat together at the banquet. So I've made wonderful friends. These these people, I can't even carry their shoes. You know, they're so accomplished, but they've befriended me, and you know, that's one of the big draws for me to go to a conference. But it's been limited, and you know, these are the big conferences. Those are probably the two biggest in the world. And so I've crossed paths with these people multiple times, and we socialize and we do professional things together. And I would recommend it for anybody. So right now it's been limited, and, you know, I'm on my own nickel, and, you know, I'm not selling thousands of books yet. So, you know, I'm probably underwater for sure for all the research and the investment I've made. But, you know, maybe eventually, you know, I'd go to more, especially if I was a speaker and they go, well, we're paying your airfare, we're paying, you know, for your hotel room. And, you know, if they took care of that, I'd be delighted. I'd be absolutely delighted, because then I could afford to do it, and I'm retired. So I don't really have anything that would prevent me other than, you know, I just can't afford to do more than 2 conferences a year.
Eric has a question for you in the Space Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. He is asking, what do you know, Ray, about the United States Air Force having made some flying disc craft? And no, I'm not talking about the Avro car.
Yeah, the only thing I know about is the Avro car, and there was supposed to be another one that the Navy did called the Flapjack, and the Air Force had a big hand in it, but it was Navy-driven, and it looks like a gigantic disc, and it's got a tail, and I've actually seen a video of this thing flying, and it was on a documentary, so it's not a secret thing. So, you know, I think they did others, but you know, the Avro car was a different kind of propulsion system. You know, it was a vertical takeoff, where, you know, the other one was more of a jet engine. How they got it launched, I don't know. A lot of times they drop these things from a carrier bird, and then, like, you know, missile testing, or, you know, the F-15 or the X-15, where, you know, they drop it from the underbelly. But yeah, I saw one in the documentary. I know nothing about it other than the visual.
I'm not sure that what they're actually hiding or what they are doing. I want to find out. I definitely want to find out.
I can't imagine that we have a disc that operates like what we see in the sky and that we claim is extraterrestrial. I was with Air Force Research Labs for nearly 40 years, and yeah, you don't get to see everything, but you know what? I can't imagine we've got a disc that flies around like one of theirs.
Well, there is rumor that the TR-3B, the big black triangle, is ours. What do you think about that?
Prove it to me. I can't see it. I just don't think we're there yet. You know, regardless of what Ben Rich says.
Ben Rich,
yeah,
that's a potent name to bring up, or especially around these parts, considering that
right.
You know, some of the statements he made, and, you know, whether or not people believe it's a hoax or not, it's pretty incredible that someone of that stature would be able to say that unless he was playing the ultimate spy mind trick.
Well, there's actually a different dissection of that event, and one that I read makes it perfectly plausible that he was quoted out of context. And when he said, we have the technology to go to the stars, it didn't mean that we have an extraterrestrial-like craft to do it in. And there's actually somebody found, more information on that, and at a speech he gave that helped correct that. Now, maybe he was just covering his tracks, but it leads one to believe that we've put more meaning into his statement than what was really meant at the time. So, again, I haven't researched it that deeply, but the jury is still out on what he meant by that statement.
So the curiosity still roams around Area 51 for you then, or Wright-Pat, which would be much, much closer.
Absolutely. And, I can get on Wright-Pat pretty much any time until somebody listens to this show and they revoke my pass and they squash my pension. But they bring birds out here every once in a while, because the program officers are out here. And they're not, they're no longer classified, but, we see our share of birds that were formerly classified here. So it wouldn't be surprising that, someday soon, this TR-3 or whatever you mentioned, if it makes its way to the runway, you'll be the second person to know, Dave. I promise you that.
I hope so. I'm going to hold you up on that. Hey, I want to ask you, you're from Ohio, and the one thing that I have noticed in this last year, Ray, is how many guests of mine actually are from Ohio, and how much weird and strange happenings happen in Ohio. What is it about that Ohio, West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania area? It's almost like a triangle, and I don't mean to use that in cliche, but what is it about that area that just has a lot of strange occurrences happening?
Well, one, maybe we're just better reporters. So it's just we're better telling, the story and capturing the facts. But, the Ohio Valley, especially the southern part of the state, was home for, a couple thousand years, apparently, to a culture that was named the Adena culture. And they named it that way after, they found a giant mound. The Adenas were mound builders. And in my book, I actually expose an Adena mound that few people recognize what it was, because it was hidden behind a building, and now the building's torn down. And there's a photograph of it in my book, and it's attributed to the Adena culture. But in Chillicothe, Ohio, which has one of the biggest mounds, apparently there was a mansion built there, and it was nicknamed Adena. And so when they discovered the mounds there, the name of the building somehow got tagged onto it. So Ohio had, mound builders. Serpent Mound is in Ohio. A lot of those kind of animal effigy mounds are here. The Miamisburg Mound is here, and it's huge. So, you had this ancient culture here, and any place that had a high concentration of ancient cultures seems to be a focal point for these sightings. For example, that happened in Arizona. You had the Phoenix Lights, and there was, you cannot swing a cactus in the Phoenix area without hitting a documented or undocumented archaeological site. They have like Casa Grande there, which is just a few miles outside of Phoenix area, but everywhere in that area. And where did the spaceship show up? It showed up right over the Phoenix airport, the centroid of these ancient cultures. So it may have something to do with the fact where these cultures were. Upstate New York, look where the cultures, where they lived and where all the artifacts were. And you looked about the Hudson Valley sightings, bam, right over this gigantic, ancient culture. So I think there's a tie-in there. I haven't investigated it, but it really looks solid to me. And places where, there weren't those kind of concentrations, you don't get a lot of reports. So maybe it's the Ohio connection to the Adena culture that's responsible for it.
We deal a lot with cryptids here, and the amount of cryptids and weird, strange creatures that have shown up in that triangle area, from Mothman to the Frogman to Bigfoot to aliens to absolutely anything. It just makes me scratch my head of what is in the air or the water in that area. Because I swear, at least once to twice every 2 weeks, I end up not even knowing where the people are from, that I find out, oh, well, of course your story is strange. You're from Ohio. I'm just not understanding that. It is absolutely insane how much weird and odd is happening in your state, my friend. You should get out now.
I'm originally from Detroit, and I migrated here after I graduated in 75. But, keep in mind, where was the first human being to set foot on the moon? He was from Ohio.
Of course.
Of course.
Everybody's from Ohio.
It continues. The saga continues.
No kidding. No kidding. Let's talk about the whole field of ufology here for a second, and researchers. Where do you think this needs to go? Do you think it all lands on the heels of John Podesta and Hillary Clinton talking about disclosure? Or do you think that we need to do a heck of a lot more research before we start whistleblowing on what we actually know about the field of ufology here in North America?
Presidents do not have the need to know. So even though they hold the highest clearance as possible, and in fact they do not hold the highest clearance as possible, Hillary Clinton's husband tried to do this. Reagan tried to get it. Carter tried to do it. Ford tried to do it. President Ford is the only person who was able to get a congressional hearing on UFOs when he was the representative of Michigan. So that's not going to happen. It's a false promise. So it's going to be up to the UFO investigators and hopefully somebody who wants to give a deathbed confession. And we get so much information that way, and I think it's valid. They're going to say, I need to tell you this, and look in the top drawer, and there will be a piece of proof, rather than evidence. The government is not going to tell us unless it suits their needs, and I can't imagine what that need is because, think about this. You're the U.S. Air Force, and I love those guys to death. I would do my entire career over again in a heartbeat. I work with the best people on the planet, the smartest, the sharpest. But they had a job that they couldn't do, and that was to keep the skies safe from everybody, including the aliens. And they did a good job for everybody else. But this was a phenomena that came and went like lightning, never gave you any hint that they were going to show up. And there's no defense or offense against it. They can disable all of our systems, and they do it at will. So now you've got a job, and the public does nothing but snip at your heels all day. The press hates you, and you have this tough job. What are you going to do? You're going to get rid of it. You're going to deep six it. You're going to end your research, and you're going to just hope it never rears its ugly head again. So there is absolutely no motivation whatsoever for any government agency to ever tell us anything they know about it that's going to shed more light than the researchers have. It's just not going to happen. So it has to be through deathbed confessions or, some disgruntled employee who got fired or who knows what. Or the researchers like myself just stumbling upon something that goes, oh, my God, look at this. What do you think about this? And then suddenly, that evidence is pushing more towards proof. Like, Gerald Anderson and those boys finding stuff on the plains of Santa Cruz and getting it tested. Maybe the people I interview are going to get their DNA tested and say, wow, look at this. I think that's the way it's going to have to go.
Are you surprised, though, that... sorry for cutting you off there, but are you surprised that John Podesta has had as much play as he has in regards to this topic? Because the telling tale for me on this, and I'm an outsider here in Canada, Ray, is how the media has really dropped the ball on that whole subject. You're talking about, and I've said this many times on this show, you're talking about the next biggest story to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And the media in the mainstream doesn't even seem concerned. They don't even, yes, they went on about it back in May for about a week or two. But in reality, this is a topic that should be hammered home every night until there is answers. And yet, nothing. Well,
first of all, I'm going to slam the mainstream media, and the hate mail is going to just flow. They're ignorant. And I don't mean they're stupid. I mean they're ignorant of the topic. And I'll give you a great example that is very relevant here. And it's just symptomatic of what we see. There was a video that came out that said, there's this triangular-shaped thing over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and it was on this, sketchy website, and everyone said, they're just posting that. They made it up and because people are, getting rich off of it. And what happened? Immediately, the Dayton Daily News wrote an article by one of their top guys, Jim Oddie. He's a big deal here, with some other guy that I don't know. And what they did is they got some guy who spent his entire day in a museum, and surprisingly enough, the Ohio MUFON director, to quote and say, it's nothing. Well, the two people they quoted, I discovered didn't do any investigation. It was surprising me for a MUFON guy to go on record and say, well, this is crap, and I find out that they didn't investigate it. So I tried contacting the authors of the article. Well, of course, they won't contact me. I contacted Jan Harzan of MUFON, who runs the place. He got Mark D'Antonio to give me an explanation of what the word was going around MUFON, and said, well, maybe our Ohio guy just got a hold of, our early assessment and didn't want to be bothered with it because it appeared to him to be a hoax. Well, what they didn't know and what I didn't reveal at the time that I was talking to MUFON is I saw this thing. And I have a witness who saw this thing. And I was at my son's condo, and I said, look at that. And they went, oh, what is that? And it looked like a parafoil, but very heavy, cloudy day, but this thing was sitting right over Wright-Patterson. And I know because I was like a quarter mile away, and I've been working here for 40 years, and I was literally outside the gate at my son's condominium looking at this thing going, oh, well, that's got to be an aerostat. We launch things in a balloon, and we've got it tied to a string, and, we've got cameras and sensors up there. So I saw this thing, I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but I saw what could have been the same thing and thinking, well, it's a research thing, and it's a balloon, and to me it was no big deal. I didn't even know the story existed. Then, bam, I find out about the story, I find out about, the video. But the media here in Dayton poo-pooed it. They got these appeal to authority talking heads who didn't do an investigation, and they immediately try to close it down. So that is just symptomatic of what we find with all these other people because they don't know anything about the topic. The boss says, write a story. They don't do any research. They don't do any investigation. And what are they told to do? Close it down. And that's what you find. And thank God for the internet because we have everyone else out there like yourself doing these radio casts and, who aren't really, paid by CBS and NBC where we can get the real facts out. And if you look at, the local newspapers or national newspapers, especially if you're somebody like me who saw the thing in the air, you know that the stories are bullcrap. So, all I can say is what I saw here locally is just symptomatic of what you see with the national news. So we cannot depend upon them to tell us the truth. Throw down the BS flag. Don't even read the stuff they publish.
That was powerful. One quick comment and question here from Eric Markham in the Spaced Out Radio chat room on Spreaker. He is asking, I wonder if the reason the mainstream media started talking or taking UFO news lightly was because of the way they had the rug pulled out from under them, like Roswell and the 52 DC flap. What is your opinion on that?
You mean they're doing this in retribution?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. You mean the publicity? Well, I think any recent publicity, there's still the giggle factor, and they always preface it with, this guy isn't crazy, but he might be, and then, they talk about the video, and I still don't think they do it justice. Again, I think they're ignorant of the topic. I think there's still, some forces at work here that want to squash it. If you talk to Angelina Joyner, who did all the Stevensville stuff, they were selling newspapers. They had the world descending on them, and the publicity could have been better for her newspaper. You know what her editor told her after a visit from some guys in dark suits? Drop the story. We're pushing you onto something else. They got visitors from who knows where, and Joyner tells the world, yeah, my boss was told that we're shutting this story down, and they shut it down. So, who knows what else is going on behind that curtain? I don't, but, I can make a guess.
We got about 3 minutes with you left here, boss. What's up next for Ray Szymanski?
I am going to be running the Air Force Marathon on the 17th. The 2 prior days, I am going to be